Good morning, everyone. Everyone ready? Good morning. Today is Monday, January 23rd. It is 9 o'clock for a regularly scheduled town council meeting. All council members are present, including the town manager, town clerk, and town attorney. Would you please rise for the invocation and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance?
Be with us today as we consider and take actions for the overall good of the town of Fort Myers Beach. Help us choose the wisest and best direction to take, and help us arrive at those directions with interactions that are dignified, respectful, and well-informed. Thank you for the solemn honor of serving the public in our roles, and continue to bless those who are fortunate to live here and work here. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda? Have a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next, we have public comment. Madam Clerk?
Cindy Johnson, followed by Cindy will be Steve Johnson.
Good morning, Council. Welcome, Mr. King, Councilmember King, and Councilmember Woodson. Good morning to our new town manager. I'm Cindy Johnson, 311 Seminole Way, and I don't know how to get rid of that. Town Attorney, good morning to you, and Clerk Amy, good morning to you. Town Attorney, I just want to say thank you for always telling the council about how we need to change up. Always explaining to the council how we need to abide by the laws to protect our endangered and protected species. I really appreciate that. So, Estero Island is situated between Estero Bay, which is a protected estuary, and imperiled protected estuary, where a lot of mating, egg laying, and growing up of our aquatic species happens. On the other side, we have the Gulf of Mexico and a protected beach it's protected for our nesting sea turtles and nesting shorebirds. And those are protected species. So it's really important that we start out with our next step with Fort Myers Beach, aware that we need to protect all of this. It's our responsibility. Everyone that lives here, it's the council's responsibility to do that. How do we do that? Well, we do that. We have a lot of great ordinances. We just need to enforce them, and we need to make people aware of them. I am never for, I always want people to be understanding of what our ordinances are, and we need to do a better job of that. And I think we've tried over the last year to do that so we don't have so many violations. But when we're rebuilding and all this new construction is happening, we need to start by one, within the CCCL, we abide by the state regulations for lighting. That means the town needs to approve permits as per the state law. That means no uplighting. That means year-round amber lighting, fully shielded, downward directed. We also have a dark skies ordinance that's year-round, and that needs to be looked at for these other permits, and I don't think it is being looked at when other permits will be issued for new buildings. So I hope we do that. I noticed I read all the questions and answers, and I noticed that only lighting review was for the CCCL. So, Councilman Vice Mayor Adderholt, I'm gonna see your renaissance, and I'm going to raise you in an enlightenment, and I challenge you, Council, from now on, let's go forward, and when it comes to human safety...
Time.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Cindy.
Steve Johnson, following Steve will be Madeline Boyd.
Good morning, Council. Mayor, Vice Mayor, seated council. My name's Steve Johnson, and I'm at 311 Seminole Way. I'm here for two reasons. First is to encourage you to finish the administrative aspects of the advisory board selection that went into a hiatus during the storm. I believe all the applications were in. There was a number of people also that were to be that had submitted renewals. And the reason I'm bringing this up is as we build back already, there's discussions on adjusting site setbacks, and the LPA, whereas they're completely capable people, it's a small group that are sort of making these recommendations to the council, and I'd like for the council to consider getting input also from the other advisory councils once they are seated. Obviously, with side setbacks on corners, there's enormous safety issues that need to be looked at. And also there's environmental and conservation issues, I think, that also need to be brought up during the build back. Secondly, as the comp plan was presented recently to the LPA, there's a real concern about the density, and I'd encourage the town council to explain to us why we need this additional density. Why we need skyscrapers in the node in the middle of the town. Also, whereas a walkable community is something that should be strived for, that would require then every mile to be a restaurant, a bank, a coffee shop, whatever it might be. And I'm not sure that's achievable based on the successes that we've had from some of the services like banking. Also, I think we'd like to avoid making Estero Boulevard nothing but a sort of a T-shirt mall the entire length, because we know that most of the mixed use and commercial zoning is along Estero Boulevard. So I guess just a reminder that the community itself would like to have some say on issues such as density. And that's all we've got for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Madeline Boyd, and following Madeline will be Joe Orlandini.
I'm Madeline Boyd, live at 21054 St. Peter's Drive, and I'm also co-owner of the Beach Bar. First of all, Jim, kudos. The post office today, great. I still, I have real grave concerns about the debris and the sand on the sidewalks. Some of them are just impassable, and they're impeding the businesses that are opening. Just this morning walking here, my feet got all caught in wire right outside the Diamond Head. I mean, I just wish somebody would start to address that. Thank you.
Joe Orlandini.
Do I get this? Yep, better. Hello, Joe Orlandini, 281 Palermo Circle. I come before you to request a liaison for one of you to be helpful in the redevelopment of some of the Times Square buildings that need to be rebuilt. We would like to have a person, one of the council members, to join us in our group meetings that we are trying to keep as an organized, timely fashion, but they're a little disorganized at the moment with the property owners that we have, but we're trying to formalize a pattern and a date that we can work with someone to help us through that rebuild. In addition to that, we did get to work with the remaining property owners that did not do the cleanup. They have now allowed the cleanup to happen. There is a lot of debris that was piled up throughout the weekend. We do need trucks. If you have the ability to bring them in, there would be great. It's ready. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
That's all I have signed up.
Is there anyone else out here that did not sign up? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Town Council. My name is Sim Mayer. I'm here to talk on property setbacks. We owned a house at 716 Estero Boulevard. which is just south of Best Western. The house is now gone. All we have is an empty lot. It was a fantastic house. It had an upstairs unit, a lower unit, and a garage. Our adult kids could stay with us. They use the upstairs, we use the downstairs. It worked great. As you can see on the paper I passed out, it was a middle in the group of 10. It sat on the lot in the neighborhood perfectly. There was a sand drive on one side, there was parking on the Estero side. If you look closely at the neighborhood picture, you can see it has plenty of room on 3 sides, and it was a picturesque little neighborhood. Now I'm told under current zoning that we may or may not be able to get a variance to rebuild. If you take a look at the survey I passed around, my lot is approximately 50 by 69.5 and 50 by 60. Has a 5-foot setback and a 7.5-foot setback. I have the lot size and stuff circled there. The house is about 1,500 square foot plus a garage and a deck, and it fit in the lot perfect. As you can see in the survey, I don't know what more you could ask for. I don't know how the current zoning reads, but I do know it's not good for me and many other people on the island. The hurricane changed many things on this island. Now we need to adjust. So I'm asking that you please adjust the codes to accommodate the residents with smaller lots. And if you consider the price of the lots and the cost to rebuild, it isn't real feasible to build a small house. Again, I'm here to ask you, please make the zoning codes friendly to us and give us options. For me and to people who have lots such as mine, so we'll not need a variance at all, and if we do, it's easy to obtain. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Anyone else? Terry?
Good morning, council members. My name is Terry Prasad, 1028 Estero, or the former Sunset Beach Grill. As Joe mentioned, we have been able to get the other 2 owners of Times Square to clean up, so we were able to clean their lots up. So it's starting to come around, it's starting to look good. We need a debris truck now to get in there and remove that debris. But on that note, you know, we've been almost 4 months now since Ian, and we're still looking for direction as to what we'll be able to do in Times Square. So I'm hoping that the mayor and the council members will agree to an advisory board where we can get together with citizens, business owners, business operators, property owners, and try to recreate what we'd like to see in Times Square. And hopefully that can happen sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Anyone else out there choose to speak? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Ken Pariser. I own the cottage, the former cottage at 724 Estero Boulevard. I initially rented it for 6 years. I purchased it 13 years ago. I made substantial improvements on it in the form of windows, doors, siding, all of which were properly permitted and complying with requirements by the city. It's gone, and I certainly understand the necessity of complying with new building regulations, but my lot size, as my neighbors are, many of them are 40 by 50 foot lots, complying with building regulations of have structure higher than my former structure was, having it made with different materials. I certainly understand that. I'm a 20-year first responder vet. I'm an Army vet. I currently sit on the Economic Advisory Board of Fort Myers, so I certainly have a feel for rules and regulations. But to deprive us the ability of rebuilding and contributing to this community in the benefit of what people like myself, when I chose to move here, not with singularly the commercial properties, but the cute cottages that made Fort Myers Beach the unique animal that it was, I think would be a grave injustice to eliminate the ability of private homeowners such as myself, not developers, not mass investors, but the people that are bringing in something positive to this community. So I beseech this group to give us an opportunity to rebuild on the smaller lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Next, we have local achievements and recognitions. Vice Mayor Adderholt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just say a couple things this morning. One could arguably state that the two most critical challenges that face Fort Myers Beach are our fiscal situation and the permitting situation. And I would just, since the mayor's not one to toot his own horn, I'm going to toot it a little bit this morning. The mayor spent a good portion of last week up in Tallahassee with our co-town manager team, Chris Hawley, and I think it's important for people to know that the future of Fort Myers Beach fiscally hangs in the balance right now, and it's really in the hands of the state legislature. And the mayor was up there with Chris. They met with all the right people. They made all the right impressions. The mayor is perfectly situated to tell our story as someone who lost his home and his business, and then along with his partner and many wonderful volunteers, transformed his business into the key distribution site for hurricane relief. He's the great face for Fort Myers Beach as we make our case and tell our story to Tallahassee. And so I wanted to thank the mayor for his efforts. I wanted to thank State Representative Adam Botana, State Senator Jonathan Martin, and then the county commissioner who's sort of charged with the Hurricane Ian relief efforts in Tallahassee, Kevin Ruane. And I think if there's ever a time for our citizenry, for those who are listening this morning, to reach out to your state representative and your state senator and county commissioner Ruane, just let them know how much you appreciate their strong support for Fort Myers Beach this legislative session. I think now is the time to do that. I would also commend our mayor and our other town manager, Keith Wilkins, who's here this morning. I heard over the weekend from John on Beach Talk Radio that we now have, of course, the mayor and I are not allowed to talk to each other about some of these things because of sunshine rules, but I heard it on Beach Talk this morning, or Saturday morning, that the mayor and the town manager, through their persistence and through the kind cooperation of Kevin Guthrie, who's head of the state emergency relief efforts for the state of Florida, with the support of the governor, have arranged for us to have 4 new permitting officials on location. I'll defer to the town manager during his comments to give some additional detail, but I don't think people realize, first of all, what a huge step forward that is for the island, and it's a great gesture on behalf of the state of Florida to help us. And I think it's important for everyone to know that our permitting people are really doing the best they can. We're trying to get them the additional resources. We're trying to get some information out. We're looking at the process. They're putting in long hours. And at the same time, we've expanded those hours. I just think on the permitting front and the fiscal front, I just wanted to this morning commend our mayor for his leadership and for the team's leadership as we really make huge strides in both of those areas. Thank you.
Good, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to first off congratulate Vice Mayor Jim Adderholt with his efforts to open the post office. I think it was like Thursday or Friday, I was getting ready to make that long drive out to the airport, and I thought, I don't have to do this. I can wait until Monday. Let's go down to the end of the island. So that's huge. I look forward to when they're delivering mail, but I just appreciate Jim pulling those levers that he knows how to pull and getting that expedited. I'd also like to just acknowledge the LPA for that marathon meeting. And if you watched it, it was a well-run meeting. There was just a lot on the agenda. They went through a lot of things. They're all volunteers, and they have a lot of expertise, and they put in a lot of time into it. I appreciate that. TPI with their topping off ceremony. I couldn't make that, but it is a landmark. And then finally, not really on the island as much, but there's a lot of crews out there that are cleaning the mangroves. And this is a nasty job. This is something that, you know, we have a lot of volunteers that are willing to clean, but I don't think we're going to send volunteers into the mangroves. So I appreciate the busloads of people that are in there pulling out that stuff that if they don't get it out, it's going to be there forever.
Thank you. Councilor Whitson?
I just want to piggyback on the TPI celebration, the topping off celebration. And really that was supposed to be, it began being a Margaritaville TPI celebration, but what it really turned into was really looking at all of our business owners, members of the chamber, everything that they have done so far in rebuilding our island, opening their businesses. So it took a different spin, and it was really heartwarming to see everyone there. There's more and more businesses opening every day. The Beach Bar had their reopening, I think they called it. I can't remember exactly what they called it. Grand reopening, there we go. Snug Harbor opened, so every day we're hearing and seeing more revitalization of the beach, and it's really something, and I commend all the people on this island who are working so hard.
Thank you. Councilor King?
Thanks. I want to recognize AmeriCorps for being on the island with their volunteers. I think they're from like 7 different states. They've been on the beach the last couple of weeks helping people clean up their homes, and they've been making a great difference, and it's wonderful to see. I also want to thank Diamond Head Beach Resort for letting us be here today. It's a great facility. Thank you very much. As already been said, thanks to the mayor and the vice mayor for all their hard work and what they've achieved so far. I'm just going to tell you what I've told you privately before is take a step back every once in a while so you don't get burned out. Both of you have been at it for months now, very, very passionately and very hard. Don't forget to take care of yourself, and anything I can do to help alleviate and take anything off your plate, I'm more than happy to do. And last but not least, I just wanted to share, on the eve of my Medicare birthday, today is National King Day.
Well, happy King Day. Well, the benefits, I guess, of going last is everything that I was going to talk about has already been covered, but I'll just reiterate, thank you to Diamond Head Beach Resort. Neil Hopgood and his team have really stepped up to offer us a place where hopefully it's a little bit more comfortable for everybody sitting out there as well as up here. It's not what we're used to, but it is certainly a step in the right direction, and they've really gone above and beyond to help not only us, but some of the other community groupings that have to get together. So thank you to them. Also TPI, I'll piggyback on that one. When they first met with me about this topping off event, it was very clear that their focus, they wanted it to be about community. They did not want it to be about TPI. And I think they did a good job of, as Karen said, pulling that off, bringing in some of the other businesses, some of the other residents to show that they're part of this community. They're working with us. They're working with the community to make sure we all get back in our homes and our businesses. Also want to welcome back Snug Harbor and the Beach Bar. They are the 2 of the latest businesses that opened back up over the last week, so we look forward to seeing you again. Our entire delegation up in Tallahassee, as Vice Mayor Adderholt said, spent some time up there with Chris Hawley, walking doors and talking to people and kind of sharing our story and what our challenges are that we're going to be facing over the next couple of years. They were to say they were very receptive would be an understatement. They were. It was quite interesting to see their responses and their true heartfelt comments back to us. So thank you to all of our delegation as well as all the representatives and senators that we spoke to. There's a long list, so I won't bore you with that, but thank you to them. And also, again, thank you to Jim for getting the mail service back. Those of us that have received a plethora of emails about that, I'll tell you, Jim is a bulldog. You put him on something, and he's not going to stop until it's done. So thank you, Vice Mayor, for your hard work. And gas tanks around the world will be thanking you. All right. Moving on to consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Oh, sorry, I got to approve of the final minutes. Although, Amy, they were not in the packet. There's none yet. Okay. So do we still need to approve something that's not there? Okay. Moving on. Next, we have the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion. Is there a second? I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, consent agenda passes unanimously. Next, we have public hearings. Is the second reading, if I'm not mistaken, of ordinance 23-01, the sign ordinance. You want me to read this in?
Yes, sir, and yes, please
Okay.
read the title.
I do it. An ordinance of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 30 of the Land Development Code of the Town of Fort Myers Beach entitled Signs to provide for content-neutral signs regulations and to allow certain portable signs, providing for severability, codifications, scrivener's errors, conflicts of law, and effective date. Do we have anyone that wants to talk about that? Is Jason here? I do not see him.
Jason had a family emergency this morning, but not to belabor the point, the purpose of this ordinance is to bring our sign regulations into conformity with the most recent pronouncements by the U.S. Supreme Court and appellate courts as far as the constitutionality provisions, which is set forth in the proposed ordinance. And we just simply asked after public hearing if there's any other questions that we can answer. If not, approve the ordinance on second reading.
Okay, John, thanks. Is there any questions for John?
Just for folks who may just be tuning in and didn't see our first hearing on this, is it fair to state that this ordinance is to bring us into compliance with respect to court-required First Amendment concerns and doesn't provide any additional onerous hurdles for businesses or residents? It's really a First Amendment issue. It's not expanding or making life more difficult for anyone on the island. It's just complying with the recent court decision?
That is correct. If anything, it may actually, in some respects, liberalize, because the intent and purpose of this ordinance is currently before you is to make the content or the regulations content neutral, and everyone's treated equally the same, irrespective of the content and the message that the signage may be attempted to convey.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there someone that would like to make a motion to approve ordinance 23-01?
Public hearing.
Oh, sorry, got to open it up for public comment. Is there anyone that chooses to speak on this? Hearing none, we'll close public comment. Roll call vote. See? Got to remind me everything. This is a roll call vote. We'll start down there on the end. Councilor Veach?
Just by way of a motion, I move approval of ordinance 23-01.
Second.
Got a motion and a second? Now we'll do the roll call vote. Councilor Veach?
Aye.
Councilor Woodson?
Aye.
Mayor Allers, aye. Vice Mayor?
Aye.
Councilor King?
Aye.
Motion approves unanimously. Next, we have the administrative agenda presentation for RFP 23-07-AD disaster recovery. The town clerk has enlightened me that normally under situations like this, we ask the presenters that are not presenting to step outside the room while we hear from each one of you so that we can get our questions and it's not a unfair advantage to the next person. So we're going to start out with, it looks like, Synergy. So if Tidal Basin and WIT would be so kind as to step out while we talk to them briefly.
Well, I guess that shows the makeup of the crowd.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Morning. Vote twice.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Happy King Day. Or is it Merry King Day? I'm not quite sure. King Day is kind of new to me.
Think he needs any help.
First off, just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to present to you for our proposal and our presentation today. You might see that our presentation is rather thin. We're more informal. We would like to have more of a conversation, get to learn more about you, but we want to start letting you have some tidbits about us. So we are Synergy Disaster Recovery. And I'm Joe Gross. I'm the proposed PM on this project. I am also the Vice President of Synergy Disaster Recovery. Over here is Tracy Doyle. She is the Director of Business Development and Client Relations. And over here is John Zakian. He is one of the top-notch subject matter experts in long-term recovery. So you might be asking yourself, why Synergy Disaster Recovery? All right. I know we have the big wigs. Well, they were in this room. We have title, we have wit. You saw how many people they have. They have armies of a lot. They have hundreds of contracts nationwide. They have many current contracts here in Florida, including working Hurricane Ian. You know, they have a deep roster, deep bench of people that have years of experience, and they also have people on their team that will probably never see your project. That's why Synergy Disaster Recovery. We're kind of the opposite of that. We're a small boutique firm that really, we have to give our best every single project. We don't have other projects for Hurricane Ian. This would be our prime municipal contract. So we could give you the sole effort and attention that you need and deserve for your recovery. When I say we today, I'm talking about myself, Tracy, John, this proposed project team. We're not talking about things that happened 20 years ago that really have no relevance to your current contract and your current needs. All right. We at Synergy have built our reputation on quality customer service, word of mouth. Because of that, we can't afford a bad project. That would basically put us under. And we provided numerous references on our proposal. We encourage you to reach out to each and every one. We hope you did. We know that there's not a single client out there that has anything negative to say about us. That's not to say we don't have big time experience. We do. We just choose to be a small boutique firm that is selective about the opportunities that we pursue. That way we can always provide our A team, and that's what we're providing here today. Yeah. Starting with myself, like I said, I am the project manager, also the vice president and director of operations for Synergy. I am operations, I am not sales and marketing. That's why this is a little out of my element. I'm not here to give a sales pitch. I like to get my hands dirty. Starting, well, with the hurricanes recently in Florida, starting in 2017, Hurricane Ian, both Tracy and myself were in Collier County in their EOC for landfall, ground zero for Irma. Not Ian, sorry. Ian, we were in state EOC. But in Irma, we were in Collier County, emergency contract, and then we won that permanent award over a couple other contractors, where we supported not only Collier County, Naples, Everglades City, their school board. It was a consortium contract. I was project manager for that, and that led to a very successful endeavor in which when Hurricane Michael came calling, Joby Smith in Bay County called us a couple days before landfall and asked if we were committed to anybody. We said, you. And we went there and we volunteered our time and we went in Hurricane Michael and we successfully did $400 million in just PA funds on that, another 150 in HMGP funds, and another successful endeavor. Yeah, that was another project that I was managing and also subject matter expert in. In that project, we actually were successful in getting the largest advance in FDM history at the time on a non-expedited project. Basically, the QA/QC process that I had put together and vetted through FEMA and FDM was able to make everybody comfortable enough to advance $148 million without a single invoice. That was quite the achievement. Yeah, especially with the largest locally led debris mission in FEMA history.
Joseph, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you just a couple questions.
Oh, please.
I believe my fellow members have had a chance to read through your very substantial packet that you put in. I just got a couple questions because you've answered some of mine already, but one question I have is, would you be the person that would be here on Fort Myers Beach personally, or would there be
Yes.
people below you that would be here working?
So I will be here, and I will be here as a PM. But like any great PM, and like any of y'all, in a senior leadership role, you try and surround yourself with people smarter than you. All right, that's why I have these two people too. I can't do it all. They can't do it all. We like to put together a team that fits the right needs. And that means the right people at the right time. And personally, I like to fit the right personality and learning skills with our clients and the people we put in. But yes, I would be here.
Okay. The other question I have is based on your firm's experience, what hurdles do you see the town of Fort Myers Beach having for long-term recovery?
The similar hurdles that I've seen in the past is, as ground zero, you're going to see a lot of funding available to you. Right? Every agency out there, state and federal, is going to say, here's funds. It's made available to you. Being able to stack those funds, find the right projects for the right funding source, including whatever share there might be, being able to schedule those out, being able to put together a strategy into the long-term recovery is going to be key. If you don't do that, yes, those funds might be available, but you might not be able to spend them and spend them correctly, and you might have to be able to take out loans, which that interest alone is going to be more than your match. So being able to basically think big picture, think around the corner about what's happening, and being able to put that long-term recovery into play is going to be key, and that's where John really comes in. John, you put together the long-term recovery strategy for the city of Galveston, right? After Hurricane Ike. So very similar demographic, coastal, island-based town with similar needs. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I understand your needs because I haven't had a chance to talk with you guys. So if I told you a recovery plan right now, it would be cookie cutter because it's not for your priorities. It's not what you have in mind. It's not informational based. It would basically say, hey, here's what we could do in your recovery.
I probably kind of went out of order. I wanted to hear from you, Eugene.
So I'm Tracy Doyle, Synergy, obviously. I do want to weigh in on that a little bit. I lived on Fort Myers Beach for a while. Both my daughters attended Beach Elementary School. Loved this community, I'll be honest. The people that live here year-round is a completely different person than comes in just seasonally. I found that out rather quickly. It was a really close-knit family. We were members of the Bay Oaks and swam there and met all of our neighbors, played softball. I have a different view of this. It's very personal to me. I know what this beach was versus what it is today. I think that that takes it to a different level for me. I would be PMing this personally, to be honest, if I could, but I'm obligated right now with FDEM, the Florida Division of Emergency Management. I'm developing a strategy with Kevin Guthrie, who you met last week, to do a standardization in Florida. And the reason that we're trying to put a standardized process together is for communities just like this. You get devastated by a disaster. This FEMA bite that you have to take is enormous. Nobody knows how to do it. So you have to bring contractors in, and then you feel like you're at their mercy. So I feel that one of our goals at Synergy was to work with the state and get together a standardized process so there's a level playing field for recovery. I'm working on that, but I'm going to be heavily involved in Fort Myers Beach. When this happened and the pictures started coming up on the news, it was real to me. You know, when I saw Times Square, I remembered what it looked like before. I remembered what the pier looked like. Like, everything was very near and dear. So for me, this personal, very personal project. I loved Beach Elementary. I was on the parent teacher. I was on the PTO there, served at that level because both my daughters went to school there. So for me, I'm hoping that we can get back to some, at least, of what Fort Myers Beach used to be. We know it's not going to be the same because it never is after a disaster, but at least come to a normal that everybody can find some continuity in, you know, and it be familiar. So I did want to weigh in on that because the personal part of this is really important to me.
I appreciate it, Tracy. I'd like to hear from the other gentleman there. I didn't catch his name. I'm sorry.
John.
Good morning. John Zakian. By the way, I've had a few Medicare birthdays. I'll just say a few. And I heard One of you mentioned the being careful on the sunshine laws. Just for a little side note about me, it's been a few years, but I was an assistant city administrator in West Palm Beach, Florida. I had oversight of all their community housing and economic development. So I got to know how to work within the sunshine laws really well and how to communicate with all of you. To answer your question, the biggest challenge that you're going to face, in fact, everyone in this room is going to face, is impatience. Anyone who tells you that long-term recovery for this community or any community faced by any disaster can happen overnight is kidding you. It's going to take between 5 and 10 years before you see everything done. But picking up on what Joe said, your biggest challenge more immediately is that as a ground zero for this hurricane, you will be inundated with potential funding. You will also be inundated with challenges. Keep in mind that two of the key federal grant programs will be FEMA Public Assistance and HMGP Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program. Both of those programs, you have to go through a state agency. However, there are a number of lesser-known federal grant programs that you will be eligible for, that you can apply for directly. And a team like Synergy is going to be prepared to work with you to do that. Two that come to mind. One, and I don't mind sharing this with you. I don't mind if you share this with the other teams here. The firm I work for, GrantWorks, which is really excited to partner with Synergy, our motto and focus is on transparency. We are very direct and honest. We are so honest, I'm sure Joe's not going to want to hear this, that we will share information with potential clients that may end up with them going to another client. We just want to make sure that you have all the information you need to make educated and informed decisions that are best for you and the community. U.S. Department of Agriculture could be become one of your best friends. What a lot of people don't know, and you will qualify because of the size of this town, they have a number of housing programs. They have a number of community facilities programs, including the ability to finance facilities like city halls, town halls, other public facilities. And they also have business development and economic development programs, many of which, as you move forward, you will be eligible to apply. Those are competitive direct grants, so you'll be able to not have to go through any other agency, but go directly. The bigger opportunity for you, especially on the economic development side, is the Economic Development Administration. Now, what is not really publicized, but in the fiscal year 23 federal omnibus budget, which just passed, there was put in $500 million in disaster grant programs in EDA. It is anticipated that probably April or May of this year, they will put out what's known as the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And then towns like yours will be able to apply directly for this economic development grant money. You do not have to qualify for this money because you're already deemed distressed, obviously. You're part of a national disaster, so that automatically qualifies you for this money. There is a wide range of opportunities for you to use this grant money. What is working to your advantage is that your regional planning commission, probably again has not been publicized, recently received, I believe, around $350,000 from the EDA to staff a disaster recovery coordinator. That person will be on the ground with the Regional Planning Commission for about 3 to 4 years. Once, this just happened, this was just announced in December. Once it is fully operational, they should be fully reaching out to you on a regular basis to advise you of the opportunities that I have been sharing with you. One of the things we would do if we're engaged as a team is make sure that they do engage you and to make sure that you are provided with all the information and assistance that they can offer you. There are 2 other Florida regional commissions that also receive grants for the similar thing, which is indicative that this $500 million, which is eligible for any disaster in 20 and 21, so you obviously will qualify, is national, but obviously since they made a major investment in Florida and staffing up these disaster recovery coordinators, you can anticipate that a significant amount of this $500 million will be coming into this area. I have been doing this since 2005. I had not aspired to become a disaster recovery expert, but it's something that I have found become very passionate about. I did work for a year inside FEMA. I was their coordination group supervisor in 2011. I was stationed in Birmingham that had those horrible tornadoes in 2011. And I coordinated all the federal grant programs and services that were being offered on a long-term basis. I also worked with 12 different communities and putting together long-term community recovery plans that included identifying all potential federal resources. I could go on, but I think that's...
Thank you, John and Tracy. Vice Mayor Adderholt, do you have any questions for Synergy?
Nothing additional at this time. Thank you.
Councilor Veach?
Nothing this time. Nice presentation, though.
Thank you.
Councilor Woodson?
Thank you very much.
Councilor King?
Also good, and thank you for being here.
Town Manager?
Yeah, I would like to ask, Joe, who else will be on the ground here with you?
Well, I think the first step really is to have a kickoff meeting and to know exactly where you're at right now with your recovery and being able to assess that. Once we have that information, once we kind of know what are those immediate priorities, and put together a 30, 60, 90-day plan, I'll be able to determine the best needs and the best staff for your needs. I don't want to be able to say what people I want to put in right now because I don't know your needs.
All right, ballpark, can you just give me a ballpark of
number-wise?
2 people, 3, just you?
I would say we're going to start with probably 3 to 4. That way we got one person figuring out your emergency work. I know FDM assumed contracts for your Cat A. I don't know if there's other debris work that you want to do. I am a debris expert as well, presented around the country on debris. But getting that, which is probably your quickest funding right now, and then also getting at least 2 people on the ground for your permanent work and being able to do site inspections, coordinate with FEMA to determine the damages. I'm sure your DI has already been submitted and locked in, but being able to start looking at that and then also mitigation measures for your PA. We'll probably have another person such as John already starting to look at your long-term recovery so we could coordinate that with your PA efforts and be able to see what kind of funding we could get as quick as possible to, again, be able to stack that and strategically do a long-term recovery.
Sure.
Start.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one more question before you go. Should you be chosen over our temporary service provider that we have right now, have you had experience with handoffs, if you will? I've heard it called as a handoff from one company to another to pick up where they left off. Yes. And how quickly could you do that?
So I will address this one. I don't know if you noticed when Dan Craig came in, who is with Tidal, he came over and hugged me. We've worked together for a long time. We serve on several committees together that report directly to headquarters at FEMA Washington headquarters. And we actually have contracts with WIT and Tidal Basin. So we've worked for them and with them. So we do have great working relationships with them. I don't think a handoff is going to be any issue. We've handed off to them and they've handed off to us. So I think that in the past when contracts transition, we've been very successful with that. So we do have a playbook that we utilize at Synergy, which is a little different than some of the other companies work through. And we're in the playbook right now, so we just have to depend on them to hand off what they've collected thus far, figure out where we are in the playbook. That also creates a transparency for you. We have no problem sharing our playbook with you so that you understand how we come into a disaster and then how we facilitate it, because we don't ever come in just for the beginning. We're going to be here all the way through to close out, which can be obviously years and years from now. So that's our goal. Is that good?
If I could provide a realistic example of a successful handoff. Following Hurricane Irma, we were brought into a county a little further south from here. Don't want to name the county or the contractor that we came in behind. But within 10 days of being on the ground and getting our contract awarded, we freed up millions of dollars that were tied up either at the state or at FEMA for months. Basically because we were able to come in, do a rapid, quick assessment, determine their immediate priorities, and get money freed up.
Okay.
So yes, we've definitely come behind before. We're
Sure.
experienced doing it, and as Tracy alluded to, we have a very defined process that we operate in, and it's just a matter of finding where we are now, making sure everything behind has been done, and then carrying out the activities going forward.
All right, thank you for your presentation.
Yep. Thank you for
wanna
your
bring
time.
Tidal Basin next, I believe?
Yep.
We'll go.
Yeah,
Nice to meet all
you're
you
welcome to
guys.
stay if you want. You don't have to. I mean, I guess I should ask if the council members have any a problem with Synergy staying now that they've presented? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
We're going to have our CEO, Dan Craig, speak first.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Council, Mayor, thank you for letting us present this morning. My name is Daniel Craig. I'm the CEO and founder of Tidal Basin. We first of all want to thank you for your partnership since Hurricane Ian and doing our best to help you and partner with you on your long recovery. I'm formerly the head of recovery at FEMA. I was the national head of recovery during Katrina and the 4 storms that hit here in Florida in 2004. So we have a significant amount of experience as a firm in the disaster business. You won't see my resume in there, sorry. I'm not the project team, so my resume is not in there.
I think if you made it to be the CEO, we probably don't need to see it.
Well, I started the company, so it's a little easier to name yourself CEO. But we have grown from 3 people to approximately 1,000 staff that are both in our permanent full-time and our disaster staff. We work across the country, multiple disasters. South Florida, you're one of our only clients here on the southwest side of Florida. What we do as a company, though, to make sure we have that personal experience and use the relationships we have as a company. We are full of former FEMA and state executives in the disaster business. We assign a executive to every disaster. So for this disaster, you see a gentleman over here named Carlos Castillo. He's going to be the senior executive assigned to your town, to Fort Myers Beach. He lives here in Florida. He's our chief development officer. He's also the former head of recovery at FEMA. As he likes to say, he followed me so he could clean up the mess I started at FEMA. As you're dealing with the FEMA policies and procedures, you know how difficult it is. And more so than that, how long recovery is going to take. This is not an overnight process. As you all are learning, if you have been through it before, it is, I don't want to say decades to scare you, but it is a process that is going to take multiple years to go through your long-term recovery. You know, debris is the #1 issue you're probably hitting right now. Debris is the #1 issue in every disaster to get your community back on board. So, you know, we're here to be partners and hand in hand with you long-term. We will have the same team here. We're not somebody that drops in a group of people and they leave in 3 months, they leave in 6 months. Our folks, we have folks that have been on New York Sandy disaster since Sandy happened. They've stayed there, they're committed to that. So that's the type of firm we are. We will keep people there. We are, while we've grown to be a bigger firm, we're a small-term mentality. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eliza.
Daniel, before you go, I got one quick question for you before you go, if you don't mind. No. As the CEO,
yes.
If this disaster was to happen in your hometown, is this the team you would have working your disaster?
Yes, so the person you see there as program manager, I've known Steve McGrail for more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. Steve and I got to know each other. I was the FEMA 1 regional administrator, and Steve was the state of Massachusetts state director of emergency management. I wanted to put somebody here that had that long-term experience. Yeah. I am moving to Florida, so that's a good question to have. So someday I may have to put the same people here. So the organization you're going to have behind it are the people absolutely that are going to be here. So
Just a quick question, if I could. I'm only asking this for you guys because you're the incumbent provider at this point. Could you give, we've got a lot of people who watch over the internet, could you give just a thumbnail sketch of what your role is on the ground here in Fort Myers Beach, A? And B, could you give people a sense of what the cost has been for your services thus far, and what's the projected overall cost, and how those costs would be recovered?
Okay. We'll have Eliza do that as program manager. She's the person that's been on the ground. But as far as cost recovery, no matter what firm you pick, and I will never talk bad about any other firm, but no matter what firm you pick, a portion of those funds are recoverable through FEMA Public Assistance Program, 75%. If it becomes a 90% disaster, it's 90%. It's whatever the current cost adjustment is your recoverable for direct costs that we provide.
Before you run away, I just want to make sure there's no other council member that has a question for you.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. Town manager, you have a question? Anyone?
I'll just sit down behind her. I won't run away.
Just to be clear, so we pay you a fee, and that's recoverable.
A portion of that is
at
recoverable
whatever
through the FEMA process. Correct.
Okay. And how is that fee calculated?
You are an hourly rate.
Okay.
So time and materials. So just like you would do for any of your contractors post-disaster time and materials, there's a portion of that's recoverable through FEMA. Same with our fees.
All right.
And just to follow up, and you said 70% of that is recovered?
Whatever the prevailing cost adjustment is, 75%.
75%, and then the other 25% would be, those costs would be incurred by the town of Fort Myers Beach?
Or if the state of Florida is providing any of your non-federal cost match.
Is with respect to the services you provided thus far, is the state of Florida covering some of those
I believe
costs?
they are. I believe that's an agreement between the town and the state.
Thank you.
I just had that conversation with Kevin Guthrie.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Eliza?
Thank you, Council. So for a 30-day NTE with Tidal Basin, right now under emergency contract, it's about $150,000, and that gives you on-site staff that has been embedded with your departments to continue supporting and ensuring that the proper documentation has been collected, and then as well as training all of your staff on the requirements and FEMA policies.
Who are watching, you all have a large firm. You're the incumbent provider right now. You're obviously helping us to measure and record all the costs that could be recoverable by FEMA. Do you have other services as well that help us? For example, the mayor and the town manager have been in Tallahassee. They're making certain requests. Do you have other services that help us calculate those costs? Do you have other services that help us apply for grants through other federal and state agencies? In other words, is it a broader package of services than just helping us recover some of the blocking and tackling costs as it relates to FEMA? Could you give a sort of a 10,000-foot broader look as to what the services that you're providing for the town of Fort Myers Beach? And I'm only asking you this because you guys are the incumbent and you're currently doing it now. It seems like that broader package would be interesting to our listeners.
I appreciate that chance. As a firm, we've grown from our heartbeat. I started the firm and we merged with another firm.
Move over by there.
Sorry. As public assistance consultants. That's all we did for a long time. I mean, that's the heartbeat of this firm. Was public assistance is the reimbursement mechanism through FEMA, your grants post-disaster. We have grown from that to handling mitigation. As you see here, Louis Avia, he was the head of mitigation for Region FEMA 2. So we handle post and pre-disaster mitigation work for you, if that's necessary. We can handle planning and resiliency for future disasters. So we have a unit called PREM, Preparedness, Resiliency, and Emergency Management. We have our unit has now added an accounting firm where we'll do grant management and third-party grant post-disaster grant reviews for you if that's necessary. We just purchased a technology company. We're also doing in-house case management and program management with our new technology. It's called Phoenix One Case. So we've grown to be able to do that. But as far as helping you The nice part of a firm that has worked across multiple states, not just in local communities, not just in Florida, we see how the FEMA programs are implemented across multiple regions. There's 10 FEMA regions. You've been to one disaster, you've been to one disaster. It's tough to say because I was head of recovery. I was head of one of the regions. How it is implemented here is not necessarily how it's implemented everywhere. You would think there's consistency across the board. There's not always consistency. So the advantage we also bring is Fort Myers Beach being treated as well, better, worse than any other community in the state of Florida or anywhere else in Region 4 or in the U.S. So we can bring you that advantage. We also, I am in, and quite a few of our folks are in Tallahassee every 2 to 3 weeks. We meet with Kevin Guthrie and his team. We're very close to them in a manner that we provide advice on different issues. We're the PMO for the state for all the housing recovery, post-disaster housing recovery for the state of Florida. I'm actually headed to our office there right after this meeting. They just leased in the 100th lease post-disaster over the weekend to get people back in their houses. So we're embedded with FDEM because we're doing multiple different things with them, not just the public assistance program. You'll have our public assistance focus, but other parts of our organization are doing other things at the state.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Daniel, before you run off, just a quick question. What other governmental entities is your firm representing besides what potentially be Fort Myers Beach?
The state of Florida. Where else are we currently? Are we still doing Sanibel? Is there anybody else local that we have? I think that's it, right? That's it.
Okay.
You're in Sanibel in Southwest Florida. We have other clients in Florida, obviously. Many of them are on post-disaster from 2017, 18 storms, but so they're not in the same position you're in.
Okay. Any other questions for Danielle or Eliza? Is Steven here? Is he going to be the one that's on the ground that we're going to see every day? I know we've seen Eliza quite often.
Yes, we'll have both of them here every day.
But I'd like to hear from, and I guess if you could clarify for me a little bit, in your original packet, you had Eliza listed as the project manager, and now
She's listed as the deputy PM, I believe, in that packet.
Okay, and then now you've got Steven.
So Steve's going to be the PM. He's going to be over top with all his years of experience. Eliza, we felt, given what's going on here. Sorry. I used to have a very loud, I forgot people recording.
Well, they probably can hear you, but just, I don't want to get yelled at from the people in the back.
I understand. Because of the widespread issues here, I mean, you're going to have a long-term recovery. We felt it also important to bring in somebody that has years of experience and done this across multiple states, was also a state director, can have that rapport not only with the state, but looking forward, what are the issues you may encumber, not just what you see today. So we thought it important to bring Steve McGrail in to be part of that. As I said earlier, Steve was the head of emergency management in the state of Massachusetts. He's been working for us on Houston housing after the 2018 storms that happened down in Texas. So he has a significant amount of experience across the country. So.
Stephen?
Thank you, Dan, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you here today and really appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about us and Tidal Basin. I've been here only about just less than 1 week. And I can tell you already, I'm in love with this community. I can't believe how beautiful it is. It's absolutely a paradise. Some people call it iconic, and I would agree. First day I drove over the bridge, I looked out and I said, oh my God, this is something else. And I realized that because I live on an island myself in Massachusetts. It's called Cape Ann. And I have to drive over a bridge myself to get to my house. But the view and the beauty is not nearly what it is here. I've been doing this work for over 40 years in one form or another in emergency management. And as I look back, I used to go to meetings like this and I'd look around and I'd say, I'm the youngest person in the room. Now I just look around and I say, oh my God, where did it all go? Anyway, my resume is before you. One thing it does not mention on my resume is my time as an elected official. I have served my town as a town councilor like you. We're called selectmen back there, now called select persons, but it's a select board of 5 people who run the town of Wakefield. I also served that town as a commissioner of the Gas and Light Department, as well later on as a member of the town's finance committee. So I understand town government. I understand how you act and what your responsibilities are and what it is to be on that side of the table. I also have served 2 terms in the state Senate, so I understand how the legislature works. And I was happy to hear that the mayor and the manager was at Tallahassee just last week working the aisles of the State House. That is very important. It's very important that you leverage every state dollar you can, as well as every federal dollar you can, and to work the congressional delegation. And from the sounds of the post office, Mr. Vice Mayor, I guess you understand that very, very well. So thank you. I'm a team player. I've always been a team player. I believe in building a strong team. From what I have seen, you have a strong team, a very, very strong team, and Tidal Basin wants to be a part of that team. You will direct us. We're not going to direct you. We're going to listen to you, and we're going to carry out our mission. And I'm happy to say we've been here for, I believe, almost 16 weeks now, right after the impact, right after it hit landfall. And Eliza Cipriana and Andrew Kemmler have been here on a day-to-day basis, working hand-to-hand with your folks. And I think they've done a wonderful job. They will continue to stay here as part of my team, working directly with you on your recovery. As Dan said, this is not a 1-year or 2-year recovery process. It's going to be in the area of 4 to 5 years or even longer, perhaps even up to 10. I know that firsthand. I worked in New York City after Hurricane Sandy. I spent 5 years there before I was relieved. But it takes that long, and we still have people up there working Hurricane Sandy. I spent the last 4.5 years in Houston working with the Houston Housing Authority for their damages they received on the Hurricane Harvey. So going forward, I think you have a good team here, and we have the background sitting out here. If you have an issue, whether it's mitigation or insurance or anything else, we'll bring in the team to solve those problems. They're not going to be here day to day because we don't want to charge you for that. But when they're needed, we can reach out and get them. So right now, I'd like to turn it back over to Eliza, who will brief you on what we've done so far for you and what we anticipate doing for you in the future. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Stephen, just a quick question before you go. Do you come in because this is, if you were to be awarded this contract, it's a long-term contract? In other words, you weren't here because it was just an interim contract at the time. What brings you to our, we're happy to have you, but what brings you to our island at this point? Is it because you're on the precipice of potentially getting a long-term contract? How does it work procedurally within your organization?
Dan Craig selected me to be the project manager for this disaster. Dan's known me for a long time. We served together in Massachusetts when he was regional director and I was state director. We served together on 9/11. We served together for a number of big disasters up in Region 1. So we know each other intimately. We've worked together in the past. We continue to work together. So I was selected, hand-selected to do this, and that's why I'm here today.
No, and I appreciate that, but I guess I'm trying to understand timing. Why just a week ago, and why not from the onset, I guess was my question.
So to answer your question, you know, when we do an interim contract, we send staff in there to try to get a scope and feel what's going on. We put a permanent program manager at a certain level, depending on the severity of the type of issues that are going to go on here.
All right, fair enough. That's what I was asking. Yep, thank you very much. Yep.
And I just want to finish with that, because I actually have done this with the state. If there's a need to have one of us here, first of all, I don't charge for me. I mean, I never will. Our senior executives don't charge for themselves either. But you have a ton of experience to tap into. So if there was a meeting or some reason you needed us to be here or in Tallahassee or something to that effect, we would be there. I mean, I'm on a plane 80% of the time, but if there was a reason you had to have somebody like myself here for a meeting, yeah, I'll tell you a quick example. When I first started this business, I had a FEMA person slide over a policy to me and said, you know, the intention of this policy is X. I said, really? Read the signature on the bottom of that policy and I'll tell you what the intention of that policy was, because I had actually signed it. So it was in the book. So we've gone through this for a number of years. And so as I tell people, don't pick a firm based on necessarily only what they're doing for you today, but the history of understanding the program in the past also, because it's critical to where you're going to go moving forward and understanding where FEMA goes. So, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eliza?
And just to reiterate, Steve is also here to support the town in the future recovery efforts. When we first got here, the majority of our work was related to FEMA PA, but moving forward, as we continue supporting you guys with your recovery, you'll also have state appropriation requests, 404, you'll have engineers on site, you'll have insurance, you'll have so much more, such a wide scope of services, and that's where Steve comes in, and he's able to assist and provide guidance on that. So now if we can turn our attention to the PowerPoint slides that are in front of you. I know Dan and Steve kind of covered the first 3 slides, but if you go to current projects on Fort Myers Beach. So since we have been here 8 days post-storm, we've already identified over $85 million in damages and potential reimbursement opportunities for the town related to public assistance funding. We've also identified 29 projects for 404 hazard mitigation totaling approximately $190 million. And we have a team currently that's working off-site, entering those projects into the software to ensure you guys meet the deadline of close of business today. As well as Florida House and Senate appropriations, we've identified 8 projects that have totaled to approximately $49 million, and we're working with your departments to ensure all of the necessary information goes into those forms, and we submit them on behalf of the town for you guys. On the next slide, you'll also see our recovery impact to date. So once we came on site, we also provided guidance to all of the department heads and ensured that they understood the requirements for documentation and providing guidance on 214 activity logs, the FROC forms, and ensuring that all of the work that your departments are doing is being captured in those forms to ensure that you guys are eligible for reimbursement. And while we are here in a professional matter, this disaster is also very personal to us. We have friends, family, colleagues that have lost something in this disaster, and we understand what you guys are going through. And we hope that moving forward, we can assist you guys in building a stronger and more resilient Fort Myers Beach. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Eliza. Vice Mayor Veach, or Vice Mayor Adderholt, do you have any questions for Eliza or the staff at Tidal Basin?
I'm going to reiterate a question the mayor asked to Synergy. Based upon what you've experienced, again, as the incumbent in the last 3 months, have you seen anything, or do you have any comment on any unique challenges that Fort Myers Beach faces? Obviously, we all see what's happened to our island, but is there anything unique to Fort Myers Beach in terms of challenges that you'd want to bring to our attention and the public's attention at this point, based upon your experience as the incumbent at this point?
Yeah, I think one of the first challenges we noticed as soon as we got here was how relatively new your staff was. For many of them, this is the first disaster that they are working or the first disaster that they've ever encountered. So that was a huge challenge in the very beginning, but like our CEO said, we do have a ton of staff that is very knowledgeable, so we were able to bring in individuals from project managers all the way to admin to supplement and fill those gaps.
But I'll add, what's unique to you as an island is just different from what FEMA's used to also. I mean, you have debris issues, you have bridge issues. As we listened to you this morning, your building code issues and how you're going to rebuild your community, it's not rebuilding a disaster, it's an opportunity to do things, I won't say right, do things differently that make you more resilient to this happening again. Hurricanes are not going away. As we all know, I mean, there's over 100 presidentially declared disasters every year. There are multiple hurricanes every year. You also need to work to make yourself more resilient, either through mitigation measures, not just rebuilding for rebuilding's sake. And there are too many communities that will rebuild for rebuilding's sake. So and it's not just a decision that's easy for the 5 of you to make. It is stakeholder outreach, it's going to be public meetings, we'll be part of that, but there's going to be a lot you're going to have to bring the community into because you're changing the face of the community. You got businesses that are reopening, one at a time that are coming. You got a post office that's not delivering mail yet, but it's taking mail. There's a lot of things you're going to have to go through for the next, I don't want to tell you 10 years, but it's going to be 10-year recovery. It really is. You think about Hurricane Andrew as a disaster, that only closed out, FEMA closed out what they say 2.5 years ago. Just think of how long that was. Our goal is to speed that process up for you, but there are certain things when you talk about rebuilding structures and bridges and making yourself more resilient are going to take time, and having stakeholder as part of the front side of that, having them be part of what you're going to do, to me is probably the most critical thing you're going to have. Because you're going to have debris issues. You heard it this morning. Debris issues are the #1 issue you have the first 90 days of every disaster. I mean, that's what it is. Getting roads up and running again, getting schools up and running again, getting businesses up and running are critical. But what you're going to do now from your 6-month point to the next 5 years, that takes some thinking. And that's going to take all of you sitting down with your community and with your consultant, whoever that is, to think that plan through, because that's going to be critical of how you work this out for the next 5 to 10 years.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Vice Mayor? Councilor Veach? Councilor Woodson?
I have a question on, because you're the second group that has just said the long term and how long it takes. Is that for, getting money back? I mean, what is it the building? Is it getting money back? Is it reimbursement? What is?
It's everything together. So you have everything, as you heard this morning, sorry, I have a problem with that. You have 4, building code officials coming to do inspections. I mean, just that part, thinking of that. When Katrina happened, we did a contract at FEMA. We gave it to the city of New Orleans, 1,500 inspectors just to start the process of rebuilding. So it's permitting, it's resiliency, it's the FEMA dollars. The FEMA dollars, while you think are going to be quick, they do take a while. And then thinking down the road, will housing and urban development, will there be CDBG disaster recovery money here? We have experience with that process also. That's what we did in Florida and Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. That money is also going to be critical because that is your money that is your gap of where FEMA stops. What are the unmet needs? Hopefully, you'll get HUD money in here to start that process. So it's hard to answer your question. It's everything all wrapped in. It's the grant management. It's the building. It's the permitting. It's environmental because you are on an island in Florida. There's going to be some environmental impact. So there'll be people that will try to stop that process also. So it just takes a while. And if anybody tells you it doesn't, they haven't done this long enough. And it's good to hear Synergy also say that because they're right. It will be a long-term process.
Just to kind of follow up on what Councilmember Woodson was saying. So what do you anticipate we're still doing in 10 years? Is this still building or is this more of the FEMA clawback?
It's the FEMA. There better not be. Is this wood? I will knock on wood. I haven't had any clients that had clawbacks, so we plan on telling you straight up front what you're eligible for, what you're not eligible for. If you decide to spend money that's not going to be eligible, that's on the council, that's on the other officials here. It will be more of the post-grant type process the last 5-6 years. But I will tell you, New Orleans, they're still debating over water and sewer board things. I mean, there are things here because of how complicated this island is going to be, that are going to be very difficult to do. Some things won't start building for a couple of years. I mean, FEMA policy, when I started at FEMA, it was 18 months. You're not done 18 months, we're not approving it. We'll give you a waiver for 6 more months, maybe 24 months. It takes a lot longer than that. Within the first 5 years, I would hope you'd have all your building done, all your grants identified, the process of going through that. But I mean, building takes a while. You have some complicated issues here.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilor Woodson? Councilor King? Okay. All right. Thank you guys for your presentation.
Thank you.
I guess they're going to set up a quick projector, so we're going to take a quick 10-minute recess so people can use the restroom if they need to, but we'll be back here at 10:30. You ready? All right, it's 10:30. We're going to call this meeting back to order. Next up, we have Whit O'Brien. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity today. Realize one of the benefits of a company name that starts with W is we always get to go last. So we're going to take full advantage of that here. I do have the presentation. Apologize if not everything can be seen, but we do actually have the slides in front of you as well. I'm not going to mechanically walk through the slides. I'm only going to hit a few of them in earnest just because there's some components of them that I think are very, very important.
The record, would you mind identifying yourself?
Yeah, certainly. My name is Matthew Urchel. I'm a managing director with Whit O'Brien's. I lead a good portion of our government solutions business, including our community and government services. I think most importantly, I am Florida-based. I live in Sarasota, so drove down this morning, but I've also seen many of you already through the numerous town hall council meetings that you've hosted. To that end, I want to highlight, you're going to see a lot of familiar faces behind me because we have been here. At our own cost. Sitting in, listening to the issues, you notice that our proposal was extremely targeted towards your specific issues because we heard them and we understand them. And our solution is likewise oriented around getting you the best results. Again, because we've been here week in and week out, specifically on the island, but also interacting with many of you. So a bit more about the team. Not only am I Florida local, we have built a team that is largely Florida-based, and it was quite easy for us all to get here. But this is going to be a complex recovery. It doesn't have to be a long recovery. I think you're going to hear a lot of this is going to take 10 or 15 or 20 years, and components of it can take a long time. But mounting pressure from your community needs to drive results in the near term. And you have a very willing administration at the state level that is advocating for a more expedited process. Also, you have federal partners who are looking at ways to streamline the core tenets of disaster recovery, not just at FEMA, but specifically at HUD, which oftentimes lags behind the FEMA funding and is typically managed at the state level. So because this is a complex recovery, it's going to require a lot of persistence and advocacy. And to that end, I'd like to introduce Governor Kottkamp. Jeff.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council, it's a privilege to be in front of you today. Some of you may know I grew up in this area, and so places like the Cottage, Top of the Mast, Snug Harbor, Lani Kai, these are part of my life for 45 years, as it's been a big part of your life. And so as you drive the beach and think about the recovery, this is something very personal to me. So I feel it's a privilege to be part of this Whit O'Brien team. I also represented this area when I was in the House of Representatives. And when I would come to the beach for a meeting, I would know I was overdressed, not because I had on a tie, but because I had on socks. Then I became Lieutenant Governor and I spent many, many days in the Emergency Operations Center working with Craig Fugate. Some of you may know he ultimately became the director of FEMA. So I'm very familiar with what you're facing and what you're dealing with every day. And I will tell you this, I can't think of a better way to honor the memory of those that we lost in this storm than to build back Fort Myers Beach better than ever while maintaining that beautiful charm that is Fort Myers Beach. So I want to reiterate something the Vice Mayor said. I've talked to the governor, I've talked to the legislature, and they are deeply committed to this community. And you see that by the amount of time the governor has spent here. I was fortunate to be with him on the dais at the inauguration, and he is fully committed to doing what is necessary to bring back this community. And so I just wanted you to hear that from me as well, as somebody that's spent a lot of time at the halls of the state capitol, and the vice mayor's and the mayor are absolutely correct, and their efforts are to be applauded because it's that kind of leadership that is necessary to get that long-term funding we'll need to recover.
Thank you. And you know, one of the real...
Just while I could, Jeff, sure. Did you see when you were in the state legislature, your state representative district included Fort Myers Beach?
I had Fort Myers
Jeff, you got to go to the microphone. Yeah.
I had Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, Pine Island, Boca Grande, all the way up the coast. So it was a beautiful. The districts are different today, but back then I had the coastline, and Connie Mack used to always say he wanted that district because it was the best in the state. A beautiful, beautiful place.
Very good. Thank you.
Again, one of the reasons why we've included Jeff is we have a great partnership. We've already been working since the hurricane to advocate for long-term recovery solutions at the precipice of the policy decisions at the state level, and he's been an incredible partner and conduit to do that. And we need to pull every lever of advocacy we can to ensure that Fort Myers Beach has a fighting chance, both with local partners at the state all the way up to the federal level. And we definitely think we have a great partner in Jeff to be able to do that. Want to highlight a couple of other individuals on our team. A project executive for this, Arvin Copeland, many of you have already seen in this room oftentimes or previously in the tent, but ultimately, Arvin originally was a client of Witt O'Brien's, is a former mayor of a town, similar composition, but also a former state emergency management director, and ultimately joined our firm because he understood the mission of the organization and the impact that we can make on communities. Although Arvin is not yet a Florida resident, I hear that he's looking and very well could choose a place near here as home. Lori Carley, 20 plus years working in the Florida area, both directly as an emergency manager in the public space, but also in the private space, helping actually administer recovery for dozens of storms. And then we have Kristen here, who actually is supporting the hazard mitigation component. I'm going to not go through every slide, so I'm going to jump to a couple of really key slides that I want to emphasize here. The reality is you've whittled this down to 3 very capable companies, and you should be applauded for that. All of them are extremely capable in affecting FEMA public assistance and hazard mitigation grant programs. But what Fort Myers Beach needs is a true recovery partner and something special. And one of the ways that we set ourselves apart is we understand the broad landscape of funding that isn't Stafford Act oriented, exclusively Stafford Act oriented. And I'm going to highlight more impactfully the most recent legislation that's come out of the ARPA funds, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has a strong emphasis on resiliency programs, and even the Inflation Reduction Act. And as part of your recovery, you happen to be doing it at a time period where you can leverage all of those programs and the additional funding that's becoming available to incorporate into your recovery. But it's not just exclusively maximizing those federal funding sources individually. It's actually weaving them together, braiding them together to fully maximize their potential. There are local cost share requirements. There's ways to offset those local cost share requirements. There are also EDA programs, small business support programs, Department of Energy programs. There are ways that you can work with internal and external stakeholders to actually expedite your recovery. And that's what I really want to emphasize here is we need to maximize every dollar that you're available to get, but also accelerate access to it. Because every day there will be people coming up here and talking about their individual circumstances, which are heartbreaking. And ultimately, your solutions need to not just address those, but those in the future. Another aspect I want to highlight is there is a lot of nuance to these federal regulations. You've already heard it. And it's not that you don't have capable individuals that can support that. You need additional muscle, and the state's giving you some of that. But also, you need battle-tested resources that aren't trying to learn how to do the job. They've done the job. They understand the regulations, or they are responsible for actually guiding a fair amount of those regulations. So they understand not just what's in black and white, but what's not explicitly stated there, how to exploit the gaps between them to fully maximize every dollar that you can get. And I want to highlight some specific maximums of disaster recovery that I think are really important, and you won't hear some of these other companies tell you. Disaster recovery happens whether you take control of it or not. individual homeowners are going to make decisions. Businesses are going to make decisions. The insurance apparatus that's wrapped around the disaster recovery industry is going to make decisions. Recovery will happen in your community, but you can guide the recovery. And many of you, I think back a year ago, you had highlighted the fact that the town was in a renaissance, and there were significant investments being made. And ultimately, you're in a new scenario where, it is on pause. You look around, and your economy's on pause. It's creating some fiscal issues. Your housing stock is on pause. Your school systems are on pause. Your tourism industry is on pause. So you have near-term solutions, mid-term solutions, and then ultimately long-term solutions. You need partners who understand every aspect of that and can actually drive those solutions. I can talk a little bit about how we actually have maximized hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars. And there are some very good examples, not just in that slide deck, but certainly in our proposal, of how in the U.S. Virgin Islands we actually were able to increase the amount of money that they're receiving through permanent replacement of critical facilities as opposed to temporary repairs. Or we've actually done temporary repairs with permanent replacements coming right behind them. That required a lot of persistence. It required a lot of advocacy. It required a lot of partnership with the federal government. Ultimately, we can bring those together. But ultimately, recovery is not an event. It's a process. And it can be a 10-year process, or it can be a 5-year process, or it can be a 2-year process. And the amount of money that you receive is going to increase for however long it actually takes to get it done. What I can tell you, though, is that there's probably a balance. There's probably a balance of the amount of money that you can get, and sometimes the juice is worth the squeeze, and sometimes it's not. Ultimately, our team has the proficiency to help you make that decision and work with the state to push back, oftentimes in the federal government, when they tell you no for the first time. Because it will happen, and you just have to be persistent, and you have to understand the regulations, and you have to show comparable examples of where it's been done, and we certainly have that in spades. Recovery alone cannot solve every problem that existed before the disaster. It's really important. I don't say that there were many problems in the community. There were some really great investments. Estero Boulevard, there was the refresh, there was Times Square, and a lot of that revitalization. There is ample examples of how you have strategically placed investments. But you no longer can be the shepherd of what those investments were supposed to be, because you have to redevelop them. And making decisions towards the future, you're empowered with, and you need a partner who's actually going to work with you to re-envision what Fort Myers Beach can actually be. And I really do think that having individuals who've been here, advocates who can actually sit next to the governor and actually advocate for you is really important. And this goes back to the billions of dollars that you could potentially get. Don't build what you can't sustain, which I think is really, really important here. You need to make educated decisions about what you can insure, but also what you can support just from a capital stack perspective and the maintenance requirements associated with it. So it is helping understand those capital stacks, weaving multiple funding sources together, and what their long-term compliance requirements are, because you do live in a repetitive loss area, and there will be future disasters, and some of the infrastructure that you build using these funds will get damaged again. And you don't want FEMA to come back and say, we're not going to pay for it again.
Could you give me an example of a situation where someone built something they couldn't sustain?
Sure. Not to pick on them, but New Orleans is a great example. A lot of those water pump stations, while they are critical, often cost $1 billion, and they're really struggling to maintain them. Simply because they received the upfront funding from FEMA to actually build the infrastructure, but they lack the capability, capacity, and funding to maintain them. They are a critical function because they help move thousands of Olympic-sized pools of water per minute out of some of the drainage areas and the canals. But that does you no good if 40% of the network is down. And the Water and Sewerage Board is a perfect example. It's down often. So that's a perfect example of, it may be mission critical, but you need to understand what the financial implications of building that infrastructure is and the potential liability issues associated with building that infrastructure and then it being such a critical reliance point. So on this last one certainty about disasters is that the future will never be the same as the past. There's a lot of really great resiliency funding. Kevin Guthrie actually highlighted the fact that one of the FDIM requirements is he wants to see mitigation incorporated into every single project, right? And so not just build, but how are you going to build it more resiliently? Kristen's here, she can highlight some of the mitigation programs to which we have expertise in. It's an acronym soup. There's FMA, there's BRIC, there's HMGP, there is FHWA funding, although not likely to be applicable here, and then ultimately there is also the Community Development Block Grant Mitigation Program. That funding largely is going to come through DEO, so again, having that state advocacy is really, really important. But I don't want to dominate the time. I'll actually have Kristen actually come give some very specific examples of some mitigation projects, specifically around some water control and sewage, which ultimately, whatever Estero Boulevard ends up looking like and the status of refresh and how that actually gets, restarted, there very well could be a fair amount of hardening and infrastructure that happens with it, and that could be done in coordination with local partnerships, but also a state advocate. So Kristen, you want to come up real quick and highlight a couple examples?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I think what I'd like to really focus on is how the town can really use mitigation funding as an opportunity to incorporate resilience into
Kristen, before you go too far, can you just identify yourself for the record?
I'm so sorry. My name is Kristen Martin. Nice. So what I'd like to focus on here is really the opportunity to incorporate resilience into the recovery process and build the town back to be resilient and more sustainable in the future. So with O'Brien's, we do have a complete portfolio of mitigation services to maximize the multiple different funding sources post-disaster. So like Matt said, that's going to be 404 mitigation, 406 mitigation, and then the Community Development Block Grant, DR, and MIT funding that will surely come. So for 406 mitigation, what we really like to strategically do is maximize that due to no program limits on the funding, as long as the project is going to remain cost effective. An example of how we have been successful at maximizing 406 mitigation dollars is in the USVI, we've essentially helped rebuild a resilient power grid, and this is going to include undergrounding hundreds of miles of power lines and installation of additional generators and solar microgrids on the island of St. John. And this is largely due to our successful BCA strategy of having a combined transmission and distribution benefit cost analysis. And like Matt said, it's acronym soup, so if I say anything that you're not quite sure, just let me know. And this is really to provide a whole utility approach, and we've been able to get billions of dollars in 406 mitigation available to the local power utility in the U.S. Virgin Islands. For 404 mitigation, this is going to be the state-led program where it's allocated in tiers to the impacted counties. So we do understand you guys have begun your prioritization of mitigation projects from the local mitigation strategy. What we would like to do is be able to identify those resilient actions and really develop them into competitive applications, because you guys are competing for those 404 mitigation funding. We do have an extensive history of developing and managing 404 projects. We have experts in benefit cost analysis, environmental and historic preservations, and project review and grant management. Some examples of our unique mitigation projects are going to be in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We've developed over $830 million worth of 404 mitigation applications, and the majority of that was done within 2 to 3 years after the disaster. These projects are including flood mitigation, wind retrofits to government buildings, coral reef and mangrove restoration, and hundreds of millions of dollars in drainage improvement projects. One of the strategies we like to do, similar to what Matt said, is leveraging the multiple funding sources together to maximize the recovery process. So what we'd like to do is combine 404 and 406 mitigation funding. Due to the limitation on 406 mitigation on the damaged elements only, 404 mitigation can come in and help supplement. An example where we use this is in the Virgin Islands. What we have done is we've taken community centers and school gymnasiums that are either being rebuilt or retrofitted and provided additional funding to make them safe rooms to cover the Code Plus costs. We are familiar with the Florida Division of Emergency Management mitigation process and programs. We've worked with other towns and cities within the state of Florida, including Fernandina Beach, which is another barrier island. Our goal really is to help you guys build back better, become a more resilient community, more sustainable for those future generations. And we want to produce mitigation projects that are successful from the project kickoff meeting all the way to grant closeout, make sure no mitigation dollar is not utilized properly. So I'll turn it back to Matt, unless there's any questions. Or we could save those to the end.
Yeah, we'll save our questions till the end, if you don't mind.
One thing I want to highlight too, and I know we've highlighted the U.S. Virgin Islands as a specific example. U.S. Virgin Island has 86,000 residents, and we've been able to secure almost $15 billion of federal investment for the territory. So it's really important when you're thinking about rebuilding every aspect of the infrastructure. We have our hand in everything. One specific example I want to highlight on the mitigation front is they don't have to exclusively be public facilities. There's opportunities to actually develop some public-private partnerships, and I'm going to highlight Margaritaville as an example that's still under construction. We've seen examples where major resorts have actually incorporated safe room elements and infrastructure hardening to be used as a localized EOC and/or a safe room and shelter for residents ahead of major storms for those that can't evacuate or it's too late to evacuate. That obviously is a nice financial injection for the development of those facilities for the developer, but also allows you to have a relationship with them that can be for 20 or 30 or 40 years, and it is essentially their responsibility thereafter to maintain those facilities. So really great example of how an upfront investment using federal funding can actually benefit not just the community, but also strengthen your relationship with some of those key parties. Again, USVI is a very specific example, but where we've had a lot of success more recently is just helping communities with the very complex grant process. You know, grants are grants are grants, but at the same time, you're working across 5, 6 different state or federal agencies. They have similar requirements, but we have a very large organization with experts in each of those. And that's, you know, Department of Transportation programs, that is even some of the NEPA requirements associated with redevelopment and coastal barrier zones. Certainly have that expertise in-house. One of the benefits of our model is we run a very lean model with you. You're going to have a dedicated point of contact, but they have incredible reach behind them. They have the ability to go find the appropriate subject matter expert, bring them back, use them for exactly what they need, and then move on. We're not going to drop an army of resources in here just to build time for you. We're very focused on outcomes and accelerated outcomes. Arvind, do you want to give any last parting words? Nope? Okay. All right. Fair enough. Questions?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I asked the same question to the others, and I'll ask it to you. If this disaster was to happen in your backyard, and you had to get up from your camper in the morning and go and answer to the public, is this the team that you would have on the ground handling your disaster recovery?
This did happen in my backyard, obviously. I'm just up the road and my house was damaged, and I certainly had to go through the very complex process, not nearly to the scale. But in 2008, I lived in Galveston Island, towards the west end of the island, and my house was completely ripped off its foundation. And there is something incredibly humbling about going to a hotel with a backpack, and that's the only thing you own anymore. All my critical documents, passports, et cetera. You know, I wasn't the smart one that had all that stuff together. Fortunately, I was able to bounce back, but I've been able to use that experience to help build the team that you see here today and across our organization that are practitioners. They've been in your shoes, they've been in emergency managers, but they've also, in some element, have lived through a lot of what your homeowners are and business owners are working through. So I think we have an extremely battle-tested team, and yes, absolutely, this is the team that I would want to face my constituents with behind my back.
In your packet here, you've got Lori. Is she who would be the person that would be here daily?
Lori is, and there's a reason I'm talking today. Lori,
Oh, I didn't see her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lori's lost a little bit of her voice, so it's not like we're trying to hide her.
No,
She is
that's
absolutely
fine.
here.
I didn't see her back there. Sorry, Lori. No problem. Councilor Veach, do you have any? I'll start with Vice Mayor Adderholt.
Just briefly then. So I think you just sort of answered this question. So Lori will be on the ground. What's the difference between the project manager and the project executive and your particular title role? Help me understand who Keith, our town manager, is going to see every day and interact with on a regular basis.
Yeah, that is Lori, but one thing I want to highlight, because I'm just based in Sarasota, is you'll definitely see a fair amount of me. I lead our business units, and so I would say that in the day-to-day interaction with client engagements, I'm less involved, unless it matters. And I think this is one that matters, especially being in my backyard. So absolutely. Arvin, as I mentioned, has been here since the hurricane, who has been visiting not just your community, but surrounding communities, and is really vested in its recovery. So you will see Arvin. The difference between the project manager, project manager is actually going to be working with you day to day. Project executive is someone that you can hold our company accountable to. So while I'll say that Arvin and I will share those responsibilities, the reality is that the buck stops with us. If you're feeling like you're getting inadequate support, we can immediately rectify that issue. Again, we're not intending to deploy a bunch of untested resources and have them learn on the job. We're very focused on you getting the expertise that you need, who understands the process and can do that day to day.
Can you talk a little bit about Lori's background and specific experience?
Yes, Florida-based especially. Lori, I mean, if you're up for talking, you're more than welcome to actually take a stab at it.
I can try for a little bit. I just didn't want to take up the time with you not being able to hear me. Hi, I'm Laurie
Just talk
Carley.
real close to the microphone. That'll
Yes,
help
sir.
you. Yep.
Hi, I'm Laurie Carley. I lived in Florida since I was in 9th grade. I began emergency management 22 years ago. I've been an emergency management coordinator and a director throughout the state of Florida, and I have relationships with the state of Florida. Back when Craig Fugate was the state emergency manager, I've handled a lot of 5 years full PA experience on top of the full spectrum of emergency management, and that includes hospital 50/50 replacements, working with school boards, work in mitigation, which she's much more educated in mitigation, so I'm going to let her answer the questions for that. Utilizing those funds in order to build resiliency for the buildings, which includes culverts, which includes roadways, and includes building the facilities back better. So I've been doing this about 22 years in Florida, and I used to live in Hendry County for about 25 years. So I've been in the area, I know the area, and this is a passion of mine. So that's my experience throughout the state.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now, Councilor Veach, do you have any questions?
I didn't really ask this of the others, but how do you handle something like some of the people mentioned Times Square, where we have private ownership, we have county ownership, and it's in a V zone, and it's a commercial area. I mean, does that create a lot of complexities with trying to get funding, resiliency funding?
No, I mean, to a certain extent, so the complexity is more oriented around how you manage the complexity, and that's where the resiliency funding comes in. You can't solve for every complexity. You can't mitigate every complexity. How you manage it is really what's important. So in that specific example, it's not just working with the small business owners and those that are leveraging the space for tourism, for economic development. It's also looking at how you can incorporate not just the ability to sustain future events, but how it can be a centralized function for resiliency. And I think this is where we probably have the most amount of strength with our non-disaster related recovery portfolio, because there is incredible amounts of community development focused funding, Safe Streets Initiative funding, green initiative funding that can be pumped into projects like that. So if we do face an impediment where you get a state or federal agency saying, nah, we don't really want to make an investment in such a repetitive loss area, there are other mechanisms to find the available funding. And I think that that's really a benefit of our team is we start with the outcome. What are you trying to achieve? And then let's go map it back to 87 programs that are currently available with NOFAs on the street to find you the right source, and then develop a very competitive application to be able to secure that funding.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Councilor Woodson? Councilor King?
Okay.
Town Manager?
I do have a few questions, if you don't mind. Are you working with any other clients locally, other jurisdictions with this event?
We are working with Charlotte County. And then we also are doing some of the more emergency protective measure reimbursement work with Tampa. We've also been working with Venice, but that's it locally.
Okay, thank you. All right, a couple of questions that are probably difficult for you to answer, so I'm just looking for a ballpark or a range.
Sure.
What would you anticipate a range of your monthly costs would be, not counting that, we're 75, 25, or 12 and a half, whatever that percentage falls out to? What would you anticipate a range of your
I think it's going to be variable, but you're right, it's a very difficult question to answer because effectively in the kickoff meeting we start scoping. But as I've mentioned, we have a lean model, right? So, part of the scoping process is understanding what your needs are and then being able to map them, but most importantly, map them to available funding sources, right? Because the last thing we want is for you to incur incredible amounts of costs that are not reimbursed by some of these federal programs. So you will see scaling, especially as we start leaning into the benefit cost analysis piece of this, or actually scoping some of those cost estimations and cost escalation factors. I think what you're probably hearing from a lot of your vendors, but also some of your external stakeholders like FPL, is supply chain disruptions are both increasing the cost of this recovery, but also delaying the cost of recovery. And delays cost money in and of themselves. So those need to be factored into your cost estimates. And then obviously you may get a rebuff from the federal partners on some of that. So showing your work on the margins is important. But ultimately the benefit is you get the full maximized funding, and obviously there's the administrative fee that comes with that, so it can offset our fees.
I probably should have asked this question first. How many people would you anticipate having on the ground in our offices on a daily basis? Talk about Laurie.
Yeah, it really is completely up to you. Like I said, we've been locally present. I think that we're quickly moving into an environment where things are more productive when you are working in an office with somebody. But I will share with you that stops when you've submitted a project, right? The last thing we want is an army of resources taking up your space and your time when we've already kicked the football on the other side of the fence and we're just waiting for him to throw it back, right? So again, modular team, scalable. It's a continuing partnership. So while I imagine you're going to see quite a bit of Laurie, the benefit is Edmund, which I didn't introduce, is Edmund Saldana. He's an engineer. Certainly come support aspects of it. We have a number of individuals that are also locally based, or not locally based, but Florida based, could certainly come in when they're needed and then get out. So we're not costing you a lot of money, but we're also not stressing your recovery, because something I'm extremely mindful of, having obviously been impacted myself in prior events, every hotel room we take up is a hotel room your residents can't, right? So ultimately we need to, in the near term, transition to a recovery economy. So every injection of recovery funding needs to be reinvested in the community, I think, but we can do that in an educated way.
Okay. You may have mentioned it and I may have missed it, about long-term recovery planning. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So many of you may not have seen it. If you haven't, I'll send it to you. One of the interesting ways we've leaned into this event is we have this dashboard, this recovery dashboard on our website. It's a publicly available tool, and it's tapped into FEMA PA, IA, the NFIP data. We actually are working with the state right now and the Office of Insurance Regulations to potentially get some of the citizens' data. And we've been modeling some of the acute impacts, but also what the economic impacts are. And these are the fabrics of not just a long-term recovery plan, but also your unmet needs analysis that will leverage a lot of the CDBG funding. So it's important that you have that near term. Fortunately, we've already pulled a lot of it together and are making it available to individuals like yourself. And there is a tab. You can drill directly in to Fort Myers Beach, see the number of individuals who applied for FEMA assistance, what type of assistance they're getting, who had insurance, who didn't have insurance, not on a home-by-home basis. Obviously, it's a roll-up, but we've got some really great data visualizations and slice that data in a way that it can help support the long-term recovery. Long-term recovery planning can be a series of steering committees. Community engagement's incredibly important, and we live increasingly in a digital age where residents may not be here. They may be displaced, and your ability to engage with them may be online. So the ability to leverage some technology tools to get their input into what the vision of this community is really important. We have some great corporate partners who do community engagement, ranking, scoring, budget modeling, in which each of your residents can play with various tools. It's dangerous, right? Making so much of that decision empowerment, but I think it is one of our skill sets is not just the ability to visualize, but to drive data-driven decisions into a long-term recovery plan. And I'll highlight the fact that, one of the reasons you're in fiscal straits right now, obviously, is because everything's on pause. So restarting the economy is critically important, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. So I'd say long-term recovery planning starts in the near term, and we can absolutely do that, and we have some great ideas on how to do that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we get the lights on for the rest of the, not that anybody probably wants to see our mugs, but we'll make it brighter for you anyway. I just want to thank all three of the firms that came out today to do a presentation for my fellow counselors. I've had a chance to work with one of you quite often over the last 2 months. It's very informative. I think hopefully in your presentations they were able to correlate that with your proposal to be able to understand how important this is over the next long term 5 to 10 years that we're going to need the services of this company. So I pushed very hard for this presentation on the request, or not the request, but the suggestion from Director Guthrie specifically, being that there was a change in management and a change in the council. It was very important that we were working with someone that we could feel comfortable with, to see their face, to see how they react to some of the questions that we have, and to make sure that we're working with who we want to work with. One of the suggestions that I got from the state people, including Director Guthrie, was, who's going to have your best interest? You have to look for who's going to have your best interest at heart as you move forward, because you are going to be married to them, so to speak, for quite a long time. So, again, I appreciate all of you coming out and giving us your suggestions, and we'll vote on it here in just a second. Unless anybody has any discussion, I'm going to reach over. Let me do this first. Anybody at the council have any discussion on this before I ask a question to the town manager?
Do we have the matrix that the committee originally did with us?
These are the top 3 people of, I think there were 9 originally, if I'm not mistaken, that submitted, and these were through the committee, which also had a state-appointed representative on there to review. These were the top 3 that were presented to us for the presentations.
Okay, so we don't have anything more granular from the selection committee?
No.
I don't have a matrix.
All right.
Any other discussion?
I may have some additional questions depending upon what your question is to the town manager. So go ahead.
Okay. Councilor King?
Like the Vice Mayor, I'm going to wait and see what you have to say, and then I've got a couple I think I'd like to throw at you and the town manager.
Okay, perfect. Town manager, you could choose to answer this if you want. Based on your experience, your plethora of experience, I should say, in these types of arenas, do you care to opine on a ranking that you would choose based on the presentations and the documentation that has been provided to us?
Well, obviously, as was stated, all 3 firms are excellent firms, and we got to that point, so I can't disagree with the top 3 being offered to us. I think each one of them, from the presentations here today, would do us well. I think the strengths I saw, Whit presented a very good detail and specifics on programs, and I think that Tidal Basin has a deep team also, as Whit does, and they're in-house right now, and I know it would cause me anxiety to change horse in the middle of the stream. I think that Synergy is a good boutique firm, and And I think that gives us a strength of that tailoring to us that a boutique firm would probably bring specialization. If I had to rank right now, I would probably, so I'll throw all that out for discussion, but if I had to rank right now, I would probably rank Tidal Basin and Synergy very close to 1 and 2, and then WIT is number 3.
Can you give us some reason for that ranking?
Yes. I think Tidal Basin offers depth that we would want. I like the fact that they've already been in-house, and I know with someone like that, we know their strengths and their weaknesses better than we do the other 2 firms. But I think that changing horses midstream is somewhat difficult, although they do have some good relationships between the firms, as was referenced in the discussion. But I would favor that, although I saw good positives in the other discussions too. And then Synergy is a very close second.
Okay. Well, I'll just, for me, you know, I asked to have this, and I think one of the specific things I asked was that I personally would have liked, I wanted to hear from the project managers. I wanted to hear from the person that was going to be sitting in the seat, that was going to be answering our questions, that was going to be, you know, our day-to-day person that we're going to work with. Because as you said, they're all very well talented. They all, speaking with the director and other people at the state, they all have great relationships. They all have that open communication. They all have that contacts. They all know what they're doing. But for me, I just tried to take the advice that I was given by people that do this for a living every day. And only one of the companies, in my opinion, came out and did what I thought was a very simple request. Hear from the person that's going to represent us. We all know that there are people in the background that can certainly help and certainly provide answers that they may not know, and I don't expect them to know every answer by all means. So that's kind of where my head is as far as my ranking. But for that, I'll see if the Vice Mayor and Mr. King have questions now. They said they may have.
I don't have anything additional, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I could also add, that I did reach out to other sources in that industry that were not involved with our solicitation for their input, and their input was also supported Tidal Basin and Synergy.
I would assume, because there's the 2 financial aspects of this, are how much it costs us and then how much we can expect in return. So I assume that the costs of most of these firms would be similar.
That's kind of why I asked that last question. We had that from one firm, didn't ask it of another, so I asked of the third, because that is a consideration. If those costs are not covered by the state, we could probably count on half of our 25% being covered. I'm not sure if those decisions have been made yet or not. We, in our legislative package, are asking for 100% coverage there, but that's not guaranteed yet.
And I think, too, that I would assume, and I'm not an expert in this, that the further away we get from the storm in time, the chance of the percentage of coverage gets less, like it did with debris, right? Where it starts out at 100% and then it goes to 90, and then
once it's fixed, it's fixed. So we hope it's fixed sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, I think all of our presenters did a very good job of making a very good point that the legislative session and the testimony put out by Kevin Guthrie last week was very specific to that. They're really looking for people to harden their structures. They're really looking for people to build back so that they don't have to go through this again, so that we don't have to go through this again. So I think that their willingness and their openness, at least in my conversations, is, you know, there's no set thing that they've actually committed to, but they've all said that they're going to be there to help us. We obviously have to do our part and show that we're doing what we need to do to make sure that they don't have to go through this again, or our residents don't have to go through this again. So I think that's a very important part. I think that goes to your question, Councilor Veach, as to how much that they're very broad on what they're willing to do. I think they're willing to see what we do, as well as other communities that were affected. It's just my personal opinion, but I think the more that we can show that we're more than we already have, that we're a very resilient community, that we're willing to stand behind our words and actually go through with it. So I think that's going to have a lot to do with what your question was.
If I could expand on what Councilor Veach had said, and using the town manager's phrase of ballpark figures, do we have a ballpark figures of cost rankings that you could do for us, or do you understand what I'm asking?
We have the cost estimates that were in the proposals initially, which are all fairly equivalent. I think actually WIT was on average probably the lowest, and then Synergy, and then Tidal Basin. But they are all within $10, $15 an hour.
Okay,
But they were hourly rates, not the lump sum that we did here of a monthly rate.
And second, and I don't want to put either of you on the spot for this, but you will be dealing with these companies a lot more than I will. Do you have a feeling that you want to share about who you could work best with, or has that come across to you yet? Or I'd say that to the town manager and the mayor as well.
Well, I'll go first if you want. I've only worked with a couple of them. One group, or Tidal Basin, is who we have in-house right now doing the work for us. I do not have anything against them at all. I think they've been doing a great job. So I can only judge my experience with the recovery team based on what I have with them. I also have asked around to a lot of state representatives that have worked with all three of these firms. They've all had very good things to say about every single one of them, and some bad things to say about every single one of them. So I can only go by personally what, I really believe this is a time that I have to heavily rely on suggestions, recommendations from people that have been through it before, because as they have stated, we have not been through this before. Hopefully we never have to go through it again, but I'm going to go with my gut feeling on this as far as how I'm going to rank them, based on the questions that I asked and then the way they were answered and input from people that I come to trust. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I've only had the opportunity to work with one group right now.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks.
I've worked with WIT and with Tidal Basin and found them both excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I would just one kind of comment I would say is that I appreciate the potential value of more of a boutique firm, but I kind of, I just feel that maybe a larger firm gives us more reach for more funding, especially if it becomes obscure and more esoteric.
Yeah, I certainly see that point. I was born and raised and grew up in a small town, so I'm more of the handshake is your word type of person. So I'm more of a small. I mean, I just need to know for me that the people that I'm talking to are the people that I'm going to see every day, and I think everybody, as I said, did a pretty good presentation here. But we'll see where it goes. Everybody has their own opinion. If there's no other questions, we'll take it back to the voting and get it turned into the town clerk. Does the town manager get a vote? I guess I should have asked that. No.
Remember.
He doesn't get the vote.
So says the town charter.
Well, that was a little sarcasm, but didn't go very far. Okay. While she's tallying those up, we'll move on to the next item. It's the RFQ 20-06. Well, do we have to table that and then come back, Mr. Attorney?
I'm going to tally to the table and come back.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate to table the presentations and rankings of the disaster recovery consultants to allow you to move on to the rest of the agenda items. We'll bring it back when the clerk has finished her adding up.
Then I assume we need a motion.
Need a motion. Yes, sir.
I'll seek a motion to table Administrative Agenda A, oral presentations for RFP 23-07-AD disaster recovery, in which time we'll come back after our next Administrative Agenda B item.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Administrative Item B, RFQ 20-06-AD, ongoing professional services for environmental assessments and marine engineering. Authorize the town manager to amend all existing agreements from the RFQ 20-06-AD ongoing professional services for environmental assessments and marine engineering professional services to include 2-CFR clauses. Current agreements are with Coastal Engineering Consultants, Coastal Systems International, Edgewater Resources, Hans Wilson and Associate, Taylor Engineering, and Turl Hall and Associates. Mr. Town Manager?
Yes, if you'll recall at the our last meeting, there were two other items that came up with the 2 CFR additions, and this is similar to those, same as those, where it's adding that in for FEMA compliance.
Are there any questions for the town manager? Hearing none, we'll seek a motion to approve RFQ 20-06-AD, ongoing professional services for environmental assessments and marine engineering. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion? Is there
Second.
a motion and a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Now we'll go back to, are you ready, Town Clerk? No? Okay, we'll move on to administrative agenda item C.
Just a question of procedure here. Is C necessary if we make a decision on A?
Well, I was going to ask that question. So this is for the Tidal Basin contract extension. It'd be my understanding that even if Tidal Basin was not to win, that there would still have to be a handoff period to the potential winning company?
That's correct.
So it would be...
That'd be my preference.
It would be your preference, okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I would move the Tidal Basin contract extension, item C.
Here's a
Second.
motion and a second. Any
Can we get a second?
I think Councilor King was second. Any discussion?
I just have a question. Additional 30 days starting when? Is that at the beginning of the month? Is it right now?
I believe in the packet it was the 23rd through February 22nd. So it'd be today through the 22nd. The only question I had was the difference between the 150 to the 225. What was the increased cost for that? It had the 150 in there, and then it was crossed out, and then it said 225. I'm just curious as to what the difference of that 75,000 was for.
I
Anyone?
can't answer that. I'm sorry. I don't have that answer.
Let me pull it up here and see if I can. I thought it was it was inside the packet. Maybe if there's someone from Tidal Basin, maybe if they can help answer that question. You need to, sorry, they took your microphone away, but.
Oh, there's no microphone.
To provide additional resources in order to assist you guys with the deadline of 404 hazard mitigation and insurance reviews.
All right, thank you for that. I have no other discussion. There's no other discussion. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion is approved unanimously. Now are you ready? Or no? Okay. Well, we'll move forward then with can we go to public comment, or do we have to wait? You're ready, okay. We're going to go back then to administrative agenda A and reopen that. The oral presentations, RFP 23-07-AD disaster recovery. What do you have?
Tidal Basin received the most, with
It's the least, because of the way the rankings are, it's the person who has the least number of points is ranked number one. It's in reverse order. So in this, based upon the information provided, Tidal Basin scored an 8, Synergy Disaster Recovery scored a 10, and Witt O'Brien scored an 11. So the recommendation or the rankings are Tidal Basin number 1, Synergy Disaster Recovery number 2, and Witt O'Brien number 3.
All right, thank you.
So the motion would be to accept that ranking and direct the manager to negotiate a contract with Tidal Basin to bring back to the town council as soon as possible for approval.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. On to our next item. Again, thank you all for coming out and taking the time to make the presentations. We really appreciate it. Next agenda item is final public comment. Is there anyone
I have nobody signed up.
Is there anyone that chooses to speak under public comment? Seeing, oh, we got one back there. Give us just a second. We're going to get them. Please make sure you identify yourself, too, for the record.
My name is Bill Perry, and I just wanted to give you an update on how I feel it's going with the beach. We've cleaned the entire island, raked debris piles everywhere on the island. My son, myself, and Chris Weber, and of course, lots of volunteers. And I feel now that the beach is nicely cleaned. We still have piles out there that we're waiting for the Crowder Gulf contractors to still pick up, which will give us much more sifted sand than we ever expected, which is a good thing because we need it. We have a lot of scours still on the beachfront, especially some of the accesses that the town's property. I've started to do restoration of properties, filling in scours up and down the beachfront, and working my way south slowly. One of the things that Chad and I have discussed is there is going to be some destruction to dune vegetation while scours are being filled in. We try to minimize that as much as possible. And I've had discussions with Eve Haverfield about that. One thing that I'll note is that each one of my customers that I work for restoring their beachfront, if their house is destroyed, I inform them that when they rebuild, that it'll be required as part of their development order to create a new frontal dune. So if dunes are damaged, that will be mitigated when they build a new frontal dune. And then if there's properties that are standing that have survived the storm, mostly the newer homes, I inform them that any dune vegetation that is damaged during their restoration of the beach will have to be mitigated with new plantings. And as you all know, as part of our beach renourishment plan and also the FEMA plan for bringing in the sand from the Stewart mine, both of those plans have dune plantings in the process. So I just ask that folks are patient and that they realize that myself, my son, where dunes are just damaged in the process of filling in scours that are so big that when I park my tractor in it, you can't see it. That everywhere we work, there will be new dunes. The property owners know that that's required, and I'll work towards that with Chad and with our coastal engineer, Mike Poff. And that's about it. The beach, as far as I'm concerned, is back. What I would like to do when all the heavy equipment is finished, we have really serious ruts up and down the beachfront, which can't be helped when you're going up and down with those huge articulated dump trucks. But we'd like to be able to groom that out. And as I've shared with Councilman King, there'll be no charge to the town. It's just a way for us to give back to the community that's provided myself and now my son a living. And I made a living from this beach for 40 years. So it's my way to give back to the community. And I'd like, once I have it groomed, that no one operates any vehicles on the beach so that you can all go out there and see it all looking perfect. and perhaps do some kind of press conference to let the world know that our beaches are beautiful again.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. And I know we don't normally interact with people during public comment, but I believe you and your son and the Webbers deserve a minute to be thanked for all the work that you've done working with Crowder Golf to make sure that the beach gets back, because I'm out there almost every day and I see it. And you guys have gone above and beyond to help the community get that clean, so thank you.
Well, thank you. We love the beach.
And it shows.
You know, so thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Perry. Anyone else care to speak? Yes, sir.
I just want to follow up and thank you again for the opportunity and consideration. We'll certainly look for additional opportunities to work with you. This is a mission that we're extremely focused on being a part of, and we care about this community. So, as we mentioned, this is a long recovery process. Please keep us in mind for the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll close final public comment. Town manager's items. Mr. Wilkins?
Got a few, but not as many as last time. Thank goodness, I'm learning. Just wanted a couple things to point out is we have added some new resources in our permitting department, compliments of the state of Florida. We've had actually adding 4 new permit intake specialists provided by the state. They're already providing probably 2 others, and we have 2 that have transferred in from another department to assist. So that's a total of 8 additional people, which is about, we had 2 before the event, so we have 8 now, new resources there to help us try to expedite the permitting process. So we're really working towards solutions to backlogs and permitting.
Now, will they be local or will they be working remotely?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Will they be local? Will they be working here?
They will be working here on site. They're not all local, though. I know one's coming in from Jacksonville. So 2 started Friday, I think 1 today and 1 tomorrow. And the one tomorrow, I believe, is from Jacksonville.
Right.
But they're all knowledgeable of permitting processes. We received, I think I had spoken to you individually about our ad valorem tax revenues that we've been receiving, and we actually received the check. It's in the bank now for an additional $1.43 million. So that really helps us kind of start rounding out our revenue streams. And we were at about 49%. That puts us at about probably 74% of our ad valorem revenues that now we've collected back. So that's tremendous help to us. Mound houses, the grounds there, bathrooms, and museum store open now too, so we've made progress there. Permit fees started again Monday. And we also have added, there's a lot of questions about water quality and some confusion over water quality and closing of the water versus closing of the beach. And those are 2 different media. You certainly go to the beach but not get in the water. But I just wanted to point that out that we are now posting water, or there's a water quality link on our website that goes back into estuary programs data for water quality. It's a little convoluted on how to get there right now, but we're working on simplifying that so we can just post the data there. And then I wanted to also bring up that I think each of you had individually received a letter of interest for legal services, and I just wanted to open that up if there's any discussion to be had now, or if you want to discuss it next meeting or later.
Anyone choose to discuss that?
I mean, I would like to discuss just the letter, and, I basically initiated this meeting. I would like to address the letter because I think it's a little bit confusing that it refers to council members Karen Woodson and John King. I mean, I met individually with John Miller, John Agnew, both from Boy Agnew, Potanovic, and Miller. It was a private meeting. I was told at that meeting that John King had also reached out to them. However, we were not in the same meeting, so I want to make that very clear. You know, during the campaign and when the new council took positions, you know, the council immediately moved to replace our town manager. And hiring of a new town manager is in process. My personal concern, the town attorney in this case had a very long history with the town manager. And part of our change strategy has been, and continues to be, that we're going to start fresh. We're committed to culture change. We're committed to doing things differently. We've talked about, as part of that change of strategy, maybe that's in leadership, maybe that's in experts in the field, you know, maybe it's possible staff. But in any case, we need to move forward with that commitment to the culture change, how we do our business, the leadership, the trust, having everything transparent as we move forward. So me being one of the council members, I would like to talk about initiating the 30-day notice for Fox Rothschild. And to move forward, this is just one proposal. Maybe there's others, maybe there's other council people who have talked to other firms, but I would like to start this process.
Is that a motion?
I would like to make the motion to initiate our 30-day notice for Fox Rothschild and move forward with researching, interviewing, and hiring a new legal counsel.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second that.
We've got a motion and a second. Discussion? Vice Mayor Adderholt?
I just had a procedural question. Procedurally, would we want to do an RF? It seems to there's the argument that you have made, Councilor Woodson, is the argument of change, and there's been a sort of a previous concern or thought that we needed local counsel. And I've always subscribed to that in a perfect world, but we also want to have good counsel. And so I'm wondering, should we have an RFP first to see if we can find good local counsel? And then if we do find good local counsel, then we could give notice? Or I just wonder if that might be procedurally better than giving notice, because then if we don't find good counsel, then we've already given notice and then we're without counsel. I'm just thinking procedurally here out loud, but I'm open for suggestions.
Town Manager, you want to answer?
Is.
Can you opine on that?
Yes, there is a procedure. The procedure for soliciting new is as Councilperson Woodson motioned, that it's a motion and votes of 3. As far as the process goes for soliciting new services, it is outlaid in the town policies, council policies, that I don't happen to have in front of me. I thought I did, but I don't have it right now. I think as far as the sequencing goes of that, I don't know, and it's probably a difficult question, but I'd have to pitch it to the town attorney.
Yeah, this is probably pretty awkward, but John, can you opine on this?
Yes. First, for the record, I work at the pleasure of a majority of the council. My ethical obligations are to the town and to the town council, not to the town manager, whoever that might be, whether that was Mr. Hernstad previously, Mr. Wilkins currently, Mr. Hawley currently, or whomever it might be. So I want to make that clear and for the record. As far as the process, your policies and procedures do suggest that there would be a competitive procurement process where you all, as a council, would determine what is the criteria that you're looking for and whoever's sitting in the seat. And then you would very much like you went through with the companies out in the audience for the selection of your consultant for disaster recovery. You would engage in a process of interviewing the respondents or the companies or law firms or individuals that submit proposals. It's laid out in the policies and procedures, and then you'd go through that selection process as set forth therein.
And John, I'll publicly apologize to you for putting you in that position. I did find the process, but it doesn't speak to sequencing if you give the 30-day notice first, or if you conduct a search first that I see. But it does call for, basically for solicitation, so that you have multiple choices to select from.
Yeah, I would actually suggest that Councilmember Vice Mayor Adderholt's comment is appropriate. If there's a majority vote here to terminate my services under the existing agreement at the end of 30 days, my firm would vacate this position. And if you haven't selected someone to replace us, you would be technically without a town attorney at that point in time.
So based on that information, Councilor Woodson, do you want to amend your motion? I think what they're saying makes sense, and I think Vice Mayor Adderholt brings up a very good point, which I think has just been vetted out, that if there indeed is going to be a change, that we don't necessarily put the cart before the horse in this case. 30 days can go by, as we found out, pretty quickly. But that's just my 2 cents. If you want to keep the motion the way it is, we'll put it to a vote and see where it goes. But I'll put it back in your court, Councilor Woodson.
I could amend the motion to initiate the RFP for the purpose of finding additional firms that would qualify for our needs and wants as a community, and at the same time request a different attorney from Fox Rothschild to be present and to handle our town as the leader of the lead attorney. Our contract is with Fox Rothschild, is my understanding. It is not with Mr. Herron.
I would just, there's a couple things about this process that really bother me. One is that a few meetings ago, the Councilor Woodson suggested that we start looking for an attorney, and she got no takers on that. Then she went out independently and solicited requests, which is a violation of our policies and procedures, clearly. I would also say that this throwing around, like you say, there's a lack of trust in John without any kind of basis, without any kind of evidence, I think is insulting to him. I think that the change you're talking about comes with a huge cost in the loss of institutional knowledge. You look at the positions that we have open now, high-level positions, a lot of those vacancies come with a huge absence of institutional knowledge. It becomes more and more difficult for us to continue to try to, if we're digging, to try to progress while we're digging ourselves a hole in loss of more and more institutional knowledge. I have never in my dealings with John had any reason to not trust him. John is like anybody else, a human. Sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't. I think his legal services has been admirable, and he has been an honest and forthright with me in every evidence. I don't think that change for change's sake at the expense of institutional knowledge is a healthy thing for our town. And I do think our policies and procedures are here for a reason, that we should follow them as they're written.
Okay. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own opinion about who they trust and who they don't trust. I did state this is my personal feeling and why I would want to move forward with an RFP to change firms, change this position. So I think we're all entitled to our own personal feelings about things, and that is mine.
There's a motion on the floor, and I'll try to restate it as best I can. Your motion is to start the RFP process for a new legal team to come in and potentially take over for Mr. Herron, and also in the meantime, have someone from his firm take his seat until such time that a new firm could potentially be selected. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it as amended, yes.
We got a motion and we got a second. Discussion?
I would also have a question for Councilman King. So what gave rise to you to approach this particular firm in talking about legal services?
I was speaking with another individual, an attorney, and they were not able to, they expressed interest in doing the job. They were local, but then had to back out, and they referred me to this individual. We initiated an email contact, and that's been the extent of my contact was email. I asked if they were interested. They expressed interest. I then was leaving out of state for a matter of weeks, told them I would be in contact with the first of the year. Last week was very busy, so I sent an email at the end of last week, and I'm sorry, the previous week, the first week I was back. And that's when I was told that Councilor Woodson had contacted them for a proposal, and I said, and they wanted to know if we wanted to get together and talk, and I said, not at this time, I'll wait and see what's in the proposal, and we'll look at it after that.
Okay, well, I'm going to reiterate my serious concerns, and I don't think, trust should be based on some evidence. If you're going to throw around trust, then it shouldn't just be a feeling or an opinion. I think it's a disservice to John, and I think it will be a disservice to the town. We've already lost a lot of institutional knowledge. I have some concern that it seems like there's the most of the change that people are saying they want is around enforcement, from Roger to Daphne to now John, and that also leads me to some concerns about the motivations for this change. If it's a way to try to manipulate or degrade our level of enforcement in some areas of the town.
Well, I'll step in on that and give my 2 cents. Part of what you just said there, I agree with. Part of it I don't. And I think John has always done a very good job about giving his interpretation of the law to us, at least to me, anytime I've had questions or comments with him. I do not believe that he has strayed or tried to stray me in any direction. But with that being said, it's no secret at the last renewal of his contract, I voted against renewing his services, and it was based on information that John and I spoke privately about. We don't need to rehash that. I do have those same concerns. However, part of your motion, Councilor Woodson, I don't know that I could support, and I'll give you a reason why. Although I do support your original part of the motion, it's the second part that I have a little bit of angst with, and that is in some of his absences, he's had Victor, I believe, here, who I strongly believe is probably a very good attorney. But to Councilor Veach's point, he was just a butt in the seat. He was a person that really couldn't give us a lot of information when things came before us that John has been here and sat through time after time. So it was difficult to get answers to make a policy decision by not having the person that is fully aware. He can only be, Victor, like I said, I'm sure he's a great attorney, but he hasn't been our attorney. So as I said, I'm in support of starting the process. However, I feel John, if for nothing else, has earned the right to continue that seat until we decide if there is a change to happen. And it is simply because I do not feel comfortable with, as Councilor Veach said, someone else from his firm that is now fully up to speed with our current litigations that we're going through, to give us the advice without having to go back to John and adding another step. So with that, I'll see if there's any more comments or discussions. For some reason, I can't remember the discussion word. Councilor, or Vice Mayor Adderholt, would you like
Yeah, I would just add that there's long been conversation in this body about in a perfect world, it would be great to have local council, and for obvious reasons. And I'm in that camp. And so to the mayor's point, I would support Councilor Woodson's motion with respect to putting on an RFP to see if we can find local council that fits with this town. I do also struggle with the second part of that motion. I think procedurally, I think I'd much rather see if there is a local firm out there that everyone could be comfortable with before we change our current council now. I think, again, I think that would be a tactical mistake for the town. I appreciate the sincerity for which it's offered, but at the same time, I don't think it's in the best interest of the town. Again, if we find local counsel who is competent, that's great. But if we don't, then we've got a good fallback position.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion? I will go back to you, Councilor Woodson, one more time and ask if you'd like to proceed forward with the motion as it is, or would you like to amend it?
I will amend the motion because of the interest in moving forward to find local counsel. So I will make the motion to move forward with an RFP for local counsel, and if and when can we put any kind of time limit on it? I don't know. And if and when we find that, we will address the 30-day notice with Fox Rothschild.
I'd assume you'd want, not to speak for you, but I assume that you want to have that RFP is put together
as soon as possible,
Okay.
like immediately.
There's a motion. Is there a second? I'll second that. Any discussion?
I would just point out that the reasons that you made, and I agree with them, Mayor Allers, that having someone else in that seat, you lose a lot of that, the continuity and the expertise, that we will be doing that permanently. That if we select another attorney, there are numerous things that this town is involved with, that in understanding the history and the nuance of those is something that we will lose with a new attorney. I think that too, that John being, on the other coast has not caused me any inconvenience, because honestly, most of the dealings I have with him are by phone call or in these public meetings. I don't really need to have him local to make a call. It doesn't cost me any more, and it doesn't really, I think, impact my interactions with an attorney.
And that's fair enough. And I will say that by doing this, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will make a change. It just means that we're going to hear from other people potentially that may be interested. Maybe nobody's interested. Maybe his firm goes through the RFP process again. I don't know what's going to happen, but the discussion, I think it's a healthy discussion, especially for the town to move forward, and we'll see what happens. Any other discussion?
I don't want to get hung up in minutia, but now we're focusing on local, and do we need to define local? Because the person I contacted was, I don't know that you would consider them local, as if they were involved with the town of Sanibel.
Well,
I would think, Councilor King, that would just be one of the factors to consider with everybody who would apply. So and I would hope that John's firm would reapply as consideration. That then you can use local as one of the determining factors about whether or not you want, and who you decide to choose.
Very good point.
But the motion was for local counsel, was it not?
I think the local is to start the process.
It would be it's not necessarily just local, but I do feel that if we could find someone that understands our community, that understands Barrier Islands, that understands everything that what we've been going through, that would be a feather in their cap, if you will. If they are in another county, it depends on if we want to put a mile radius on it or whatever it may be. The bottom line is to find the best counsel that we possibly can that understands our needs, our wants, our people, our town. That's what we're looking for.
I don't have a disagreement with that. I just had a concern about specifically local being in there.
I do think, John, that if you make local a requirement, you're going to limit the responses.
I think, John, you ask a very good question, and I think it's all how you define local. And I think local, I think leaving it somewhat vague gives us some flexibility. And again, we'll all have the opportunity, just as we did today, to determine what kind of a priority that is, and also to determine how we all individually feel the word local is defined. So I think leaving it general like that, but stressing that it is a priority in a perfect world. I don't have any problem with that, but I still think it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's open for interpretation, and it could certainly be one of your deciding factors to get to that point to have to make a decision. But with that being said, we've got a motion, we've got a second, so we'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1 with Councilor Veach dissenting. Next, town attorney items.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, as you all have been informed previously, we have a bid protest that has been filed with regard to, I think it is the repair and retrofitting of Bay Oaks. So that bid protest has been filed under the section 2-486A3 of your code. At this point in time, one of two things has to take place. One, this council directs staff to schedule a hearing before you all where you would hear the bid protest. We'd send notice to the protester. We'd send notice to all the other respondents to give them an opportunity to participate as well. Or alternatively, you can direct staff to engage the services of a third-party hearing officer who would conduct the hearing and then make a recommendation to the town council for ratification once that process is concluded. So at this point in time, we need to receive direction from the town councils to whether or not you wish for us to schedule the hearing that you all will hear directly, or do you want us to engage a third-party hearing officer?
Let me ask you a question on that. So once they come before us in this hearing that you're talking about, can we then make a decision based off of that hearing and move forward, or would we then have to send it back out?
No, at that point in time, you would make a decision, and if the bid protester does not like your decision, then they would potentially have the right to file an appeal in circuit court based upon what took place at the hearing.
And could they do that with a third party?
Yes.
So their path could be the same whether we do it or a third party?
That's correct.
And those are our only two options? We could not send it back out for rebid?
No, that is one alternative. I'm sorry if I didn't understand the question. One of the remedies is to cancel the bid and rebid it.
And under our emergency state that we're in, is there a time limit that we can do the procurement process, or do we have to stick to the normal procurement process?
The general procurement process is, we just reissue the same RFP or bid, which is what we did the last time. I don't know what the turnaround time was. The manager may know that. But in my conversations with the town manager, we would anticipate that with all said and done, you'd probably be at the same spot if you rebid it versus the hearing.
That was going to be my next question. So whatever the reason was, they could still go through the same exact process even if we sent it back out for rebid?
Yeah, I think that what we would do as staff is to point out to all of the companies who might be interested in submitting a bid to essentially make sure that they dot their I's and cross their T's so there are no further disputes, because the nature of the bid dispute is really one of more procedure than substance.
And is this something that we missed as a staff to catch? Or
No, because under the code, at least in my opinion, the way the language of your code reads is the type of issue that the bid protester alleged are things that are, to use the language in the code, an irregularity that can be waived by staff.
Okay, so I think I'll just tell you what my personal opinion is on this, knowing where we're at as far as being in trailers and operating out of trailers and not having a place to go, and how the state is wanting us to get something moving forward. Bay Oak should have already been underway of being repaired. This is seriously holding up that progress. I would be in favor of canceling the bids and sending it back out for rebid with the very heavy language of, as you said, dot your I's, cross your T's, but I would also challenge staff to make sure that that happens so that we don't have to deal with this again. It scares me a little bit, the fact that no matter which way we go with the hearing situation, that they could essentially challenge it or appeal it, and it seems to me that would be the shortest distance between 2 points. But with that, I'll turn it over to my fellow councilors for any input.
So what you're saying, Mayor Aller, is that you think the rebidding is the most expeditious process as far as getting work started on the Bay Oaks building?
Well, that and fair. I think it sets the dial back to zero, and everybody gets to start at the same time. Everybody's aware of what the RFP is going to say. Once it comes out, they can go through, and the selection committee will pick who they pick. So essentially, just starting the process over. It's not necessarily just that it would be the fastest, because I don't know that, but hearing the words appeal never are good, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, though, would we be doing anything different? Are we going to put the same RFQ out, and if we get the same bids and have the same results, and are we in the same spot?
Well, I think that's why I put the emphasis on making sure that this doesn't happen again. If I don't know the exact details, but my understanding is it was a couple pieces of paperwork that, although, as John said, were not relevant, there was something in our code that allowed them to challenge the bid because of that. It would not have changed the outcome, in my opinion, of probably what was done. But this way, I think it would allow us and allow everyone to have a equal foothold again to rebid this. And should everybody do what they're supposed to do, then hopefully we don't have this happen again.
And John, do we need a motion for that?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion that the town rebids the Bay Oak refurbishment contract.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries unanimously. What else you got, John?
Nothing further.
Okay.
John, just a quick question for John. Could you give an update on I've received a couple constituent questions about the litigation against certain folks who have outstanding fines or regulatory issues with the town.
Yeah, I think that if I recall at the last meeting.
You don't have to go through them all, but there was one.
No.
I've received a number of questions about the Kia Stero property.
Yeah, we prior to the storm, we were in the process of speaking to a number of the property owners, and appeared to be on the cusp of resolving them amicably. Obviously, the storm threw everything out of whack. We have had some recent communications with the representatives from the property owner, the Kia Stero property owner, and we're working through those. And the hope is that we will, again, still have the possibility of resolution to present to the town council. I do want to get together with Mr. Wilkins and/or Mr. Hawley to bring them up to speed on all the different cases. There's about 4 of them that the town council directed. And then based upon those conversations, to the extent necessary that we believe, then at the next meeting, ask to schedule shade meetings so we can have those conversations and get a further direction, bring you all up to speed, because the matters are in litigation. Certainly the storm threw a huge monkey wrench into that, not just us, but the court, is still getting back up to speed on their dockets. So, we are in those communications with those property owners that are represented by council and want to bring those forward to you all.
Can I ask a general question? It's my understanding that the owner of the Kia Estero shopping mall also owns Seagrape Plaza. Is this pending litigation impacting their ability to rebuild and or restore those properties?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, Kia Estero is, as I understand it, separately owned, a separate entity. So it would not be, it is the only one that's affected by the ongoing litigation, as opposed to others that the property owners or the individuals may own. I haven't checked title to verify that, but my understanding is that they're different, but we can verify that.
If you just verify the Seagrape Plaza property, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And last but not least, I'm here to help you all. It's my job to help you all accomplish what you want to achieve for this community, whether it's the redevelopment and the rebuild of Fort Myers Beach. I'm here. I'm available. I've said that to all of you repeatedly. Give an example. This weekend I received communications from the mayor that I responded to. I received communications over the weekend from Councilmember Veach, to which I responded to and talked to him about. Same with the mayor. I'm available literally 24/7, whether I'm here or I'm 100 miles away. If there's an issue or there's a concern, the only way that I can address it is if people talk to me. I will make myself available to each and every one of you at your convenience.
All right. Thank you, John. Any other questions for the town attorney? Hearing none, we'll move on to council members' items and report. Vice Mayor Adderholt.
I do have a few things. Mr. Town Manager, if my condo board just received or is started a colloquy with respect to the easement request from the town for beach renourishment. And I don't know, John, if yours has had that discussion yet, but I think it might be helpful at some point during one of our council meetings if Chad and our engineer, Mike Poff, could come and just kind of give us an update as to where we are in this easement process and explain the easement process once again, particularly post-Ian. The engineer that the town has hired is excellent. And I think that the combination of those two, briefing the town, particularly with these easements out there pending, there's been some confusion about them in the past, there's been some challenges in the past, and it's so important to our future. It'd be great to have that combination present again at the council, so people who are in both homes and condos and commercial properties, they can have a better sense as to what the issues are with respect to the easement and what the pros and cons are. I think that'd be great. And also, and I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but the mooring field, now that I'm on the mooring field advisory committee, which hasn't reconstituted yet, do you just have a thumbnail sketch update on the mooring field and as to when that might be open again?
If I had a memory, I would. It was just we just talked about that the end of last week, so I can get you that update.
That's fine.
I am much fresher on the FEMA berm and the coastal engineering behind that. But and you're right, that does need good information out to the public, and our engineer's great. And I was even going to ask Mr. Perry a couple of questions about that at the time, but I'll cover that outside this meeting. But anyway, good point, and I'll get you the information on the mooring field.
That's great. Thank you.
I'll say one thing. I did have a conversation just a couple days ago, and one of the problems with I guess opening the mooring field is that we don't have any upland facilities. And so the conversation was that they would need to get someone out to look at all the mooring balls, and the first phase might just be to offer those for storage, not for liveaboards, since we don't have any showers, restrooms, any of that?
Yep, that's good information. I wasn't being critical, just more informational because people ask about it. You know, I certainly understand the challenges involved, but thank you for that. Couple things now. This is sort of a opportunity to speak to our colleagues, so I'm going to pose a couple questions to my colleagues here. We'll start with this one. It's been brought to my attention by a number of our residents that this concept, when you decide to get your own appraisal of your property because the county's appraisal you don't believe is on spot on, and you go and get an appraisal from a licensed appraiser, and your appraisal differs more than 35% than what the county has put forth publicly, you're required to get a second appraisal. And this, as I understand, John, help me on this. I don't expect you to have this at the, right in front of you, but I understand this is a may provision in the town ordinance, and I'm wondering from my colleagues, do we really want to require a second appraisal from our residents right now who are already spending a lot of money trying to rebuild? And we've said to everyone on this island that you have to have a structural engineer's report, one, and that structural engineers put their license on the line to certify that property. We've required them to have an electrician certify that that property is able to take electricity safely. We've only required one because that electrician's license is on the line. But yet on the appraiser, a private appraiser dynamic, we're requiring two, and at tremendous cost and time to our residents. And I was wondering if we could get a consensus here. I don't want to put everybody on the spot. Certainly, I'm glad. Well, we had our permitting staff here a minute ago, but I'm curious if everybody's comfortable interpreting that as a one appraisal would be more than enough, and if not, let's talk about it. And I would also defer to our town attorney how we would appropriately direct staff and/or the town manager to proceed with that, or do we need some sort of a formal ordinance or something to that effect?
I really can't speak for the permitting staff, but I believe, I'm going to make an educated guess, that the language may, that in the sense that town staff could require a property owner to provide a second appraisal as if there was a determination by staff that the original appraisal was so deficient that it warranted a second appraisal to verify the first work product. I believe that's how that provision is intended to apply and does get applied. To the best of my knowledge, I don't believe that staff is saying to anyone at this point in time that they have to provide a second appraisal. But if it's the direction of this town council that that provision that may not be invoked, then we'll handle that at the administrative level.
And John, there may be, I don't know, the folks that I have encountered are working under the premise that the town automatically is requiring a second appraisal. If it's indeed the case that the staff is using discretion and is only requiring a second appraisal when there's something egregious in the first appraisal, that would be fine. But I'm not sure it's clear that that's the case. And if it is, then we all are mistaken on our end. But I think, Mr. Town Manager, if that could be clarified, because right now people think in this town that they're required to have a second appraisal if it's beyond that 35%. If it's at the discretion of the staff and they can show to the resident that they've got cause or concern about that first appraisal, I can understand that. But if they're just automatically requiring a second one, that seems burdensome and onerous to our residents, I think. I'm not an expert on this, but it's certainly, when it was brought to my attention, it seemed to make good sense to at least take a good look at that.
I'll follow up with you on that.
That'd be great. Thank you. I also wanted to ask my colleagues, we've all been to the various PTO meetings by the parents of the beach school to work on trying to save our school, beach school, and everybody's been heavily involved in this. Just recently, they started a little subgroup to negotiate with the chief of staff of the superintendent of Lee County School District. And I was asked to sit on that subcommittee, and we had a nice meeting just the other day. And one of the things that we've heard from some of the school board members, and certainly you all have heard in the discussion at these various meetings, the parents have been, just as you all I've seen, they're awesome in terms of advocating for that school. But one of the tools that we may need in our toolbox as we negotiate with Lee County is the concept of the disparity of cost per student in Fort Myers Beach is significantly greater than surrounding communities. Now, some of that's not the fault of the beach school, not the fault of Fort Myers Beach. There's certain things that we can do to help remedy that by boosting enrollment. There's certain things the school can do by changing the boundaries of the district for the beach school. And there's a lot of conversations going on. But one of the things that this particular subcommittee had asked me to ask the town council, just so we can have this in our negotiating toolbox, should push come to shove in these negotiations, is whether the town council would be willing to consider, operative word, willing to consider some sort of an impact fee for new construction on the town, in the town of Fort Myers Beach, which would then be directed to sort of offset some of those fiscal disparities between the beach school, the per student costs, at least initially until we get our enrollment back up. It seemed to be of importance to some of the school board members. I'm not sure if it'll ever come to fruition, but at least for discussion purposes, I didn't want to offer that to the Lee County School District and or to the chief of staff of the superintendent until we had conversations here as a body together this week, a little later this week. So I wanted to check with my colleagues, and again, operative word, willing to consider. Doesn't mean you're for it, doesn't mean you're going to hardcore vote for it. Obviously, we need to work out the details. I've talked a little bit with our town attorney how this would have to be nuanced. It'd have to be some kind of an interlocal school district. But I just wanted to get sort of a general consensus from my colleagues to see if it would be okay for me to proceed accordingly under the premise that we would at least be willing to consider some kind of an impact fee. It could be, and again, lots of details to be flushed out, but I didn't want to even start down that road until I heard from my colleagues.
You know, I've heard
I'm
that
wearing out my microphone. Yeah.
I've heard that discussion, and you know, one thing that really came to my mind when I was listening to the back and forth is that really the school district has the power to be able to control our enrollment by, you know, enrolling us in school choice, by changing the boundaries or even the number of grades that are in the school. But I also heard I think it was either superintendent or one of the school board members said that Florida, they give basically the same amount of money for every student in every district, and there's actually some kind of law, I think, where a district can't pay more money to have an advantageous education for their kids over a poor district. So I'm not sure if that would interfere with this ability of us to to sweeten the pot or make up that differential.
It's a good question, Councilor Veach, and I've talked to our council about it. And if we formulate the proper interlocal agreement, the transfer of those dollars would be for not for operating costs. They would not be allowed to be used for operating costs. To your point, they would only be able to use for capital costs. But I think this is an issue that I think some of this, as you all know from these various meetings, there's the granular negotiations with the superintendent and his staff, and then there's the broader considerations that the school board is making. And my sense is the school board wants to see that the town of Fort Myers Beach is willing to put some skin in the game and make some sacrifices and show that they're willing to step up to the table. And I think just by our willingness to be able to say that we're open to discussing the concept, I think shows the school board, elected school board members, many of whom, again, are outside of our area, it shows that we're willing to step up and consider options that might help mitigate some of those cost concerns. But your point's well taken, but I think it's a little bit of a different piece on this one because it's only can be used for capital costs.
So to soften the blow of the reconstruction to the school board.
Money's obviously fungible, but yes, that would be in essence the case. Yep.
Now, John, we've had talks before, some of those probably Sunday calls that I'm pretty consistent with you, about impact fees are usually limited to increasing capacity for something based on the increased density that we're adding. Now, would an impact fee just be for something that's built back bigger than it was? Or if someone's replacing a building with another building, would that also be a allowable target for an impact fee?
There is a window where you can do that. It is allowed for replacement. It's creating a new impact. There is I don't want to say significant, but a big nuance here with the school board, because for all intents and purposes, as I understand, under state law, all we would be doing, frankly, is being the collecting agency for that impact fee, for it to be then transferred to the school board for the school board to use in accordance with state law. There are limitations, and essentially what would end up what would have to occur as part of this process is for the town and for the school board to enter into an interlocal agreement to provide for that pass-through and then that expenditure back into the town, because as to the extent that particularly the newer board members may not know this, all impact fees have a geographic limitation. It has to be spent in the area where it's collected, and so that would be the idea here, is to direct those monies back into the Fort Myers Beach area. But those nuances in that and those issues would have to be identified and dealt with in that interlocal agreement as to what would qualify under state law and the school board's program for collection of impact fees.
I would just say, just by way of background too, John, you work around the state, you could attest to this. It's my understanding that the town of Fort Myers Beach has minimal to no impact fees, and if you juxtapose that next to something like Collier County, they have significant impact fees on a wide variety of bases. And again, I'm not trying to open Pandora's box here. This would be specifically just to kind of get us out of this tough spot with a school. And again, it wouldn't even be imminent. It would just be our willingness to consider and be open to the concept of an impact fee to help the school.
Well, I will say this is a discussion that I think quite certainly should end up on an M&P meeting. I take a little pause when I hear having skin in the game. Anybody that looks at their trim notice knows exactly how much you have in the game of the school board. Over $20 million that gets invested into the school board, which is more than you pay to the town of Fort Myers Beach as a resident. So to have skin in the game, I would say we've certainly done that. With that being said, I'm 100% behind that school being here. I've been very vocal about it, as well as my fellow counselors, and we will do what we have to do. But we also have a responsibility to our residents to make sure that we're not imposing a tax on an already taxed community that is trying to rebuild their lives. I think there's a creative way to do this. I think between the work that you're doing on that committee with them, I think you can maybe at the next M&P meeting you could bring this back and offer some more than just one solution to offsetting some of these costs. I also would like to hear a little bit more before I can make a decision from I haven't heard definitively that the county is willing to expand their borders. So they're asking us to put skin in the game, but yet I haven't heard for sure yet that they're willing to do it. So I think if we can bring this back at the next M&P meeting and have that discussion.
Happy to bring it back, Mr. Mayor, but please, I'm not trying to be coy here, but please remember what I said. It's willing to consider.
Right.
I'm not asking anyone definitively here today to say we're for this, we're against it. I'm saying to my four colleagues here, would you be willing to consider it? Obviously, you're hearing me today, so clearly that's indicative that you're willing. You haven't thrown me out of the room yet, so at least you're willing to consider it. I just think from a negotiating standpoint, to be able to say that, particularly to a couple of the school board members, might be helpful for our negotiating position as we try to get the votes necessary. And again, operative word, for the record, in defense of all my colleagues here, be willing to consider. That's all my only ask at this point.
Yeah, I think you've gotten that. And can we add this to the M&P meeting at the 1st of February, or our first meeting in February?
So does that, can I take that as that since we're adding it to the M&P meeting, we're willing to consider it?
Well, I'm certainly willing to consider that and other options. Yes.
Fair enough. Is that fair with everybody else?
It's fair with me. Thank you.
All right. All right, I'm not trying to be coy here, but I think it helps.
I get where
us.
you're going.
Okay.
And I think there's lots of other options. I like the broader.
Oh, of course.
Right.
There's a lot of
venue
other options.
M&P to talk about, housing and the other things that really play into, our student body at the school.
Lots of options, and again, I'm not defending the need for this. I just think it's another tool in our negotiating toolbox that could be helpful. Lastly, and I mean this only in the kindest and loving way, we're still having some challenges getting a timeline for the only pharmacy on our island to open at the CVS. And over the weekend, I wrote a letter to the corporate folks at CVS, as well as to the owner of the land and also the building. It's the same entity. And again, in a very kind and loving way, urge them to come up with a timeline and to make that public for us, because although they have no legal obligation to do that, I do believe it's the only pharmacy on our island and is a business that's beloved on the island. And it's also an essential service. And I say that in the sense that many people, and we have had an excellent pharmacist in our CVS store, Allie, who everybody who goes there knows. She's tough but tremendously competent and loving. The point is that we're I think people treat their pharmacy almost like a doctor, pharmacy and pharmacist, and to have a pharmacy on the island, particularly with our disproportionate number of seniors, is really important in terms of an essential service. I see the public's extremely active. Obviously, they may own their land. It may be a different dynamic, but there really isn't a reason why we don't have a timeline as to when CVS is going to become active. And I guess I say all this because my hope would be is to see if my colleagues would be willing to consider on Tuesday, February 6th, which is our next town meeting, which is at 9 o'clock. I was wondering to see if we could have unanimity for the rest. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but I sort of am. If we would all be able to join us at a press conference and / rally of love and encouragement to our friends at CVS at the CVS at 1 o'clock on the 6th, and see if we could get a good group of people out there, see if some of our citizens wanted to come out. And again, the purpose of this isn't to embarrass or hurt or damage or challenge. It's to express appreciation for how important a pharmacy is on our island. We tried, I think Councilor Allers was on, and Councilor Veach both. We tried to encourage Publix to add a pharmacy as opposed to a liquor store a while back ago, and it really wasn't, in fairness to Publix, that really wasn't part of their business model at the time. But CVS is a pharmacy and provides a lot of other services as well. But I'm just curious, are people comfortable with that, and are they available? Again, I promise this would be done in the most positive way, just to show our friends at CVS that we care and that we're interested, and we would just want to show how much that facility is loved by the island. And sometimes just knowing that that's going to happen on February 6th at 1 o'clock, sometimes just knowing that's going to happen will cause action, and maybe the press conference won't be necessary. Maybe we'll get a timeline before that. It's amazing how these things work. So just wanted to see if that would be something of interest to my colleagues here.
A couple questions, Jim. Now, first is, because I understand the complexities that everybody's going through. I mean, we haven't managed to reopen Bay Oaks, right? The building for other uses. Now, the landlord, are they going through insurance issues and these kind of things that are delaying them, that even are, and I'll use the term, just say yes to drugs rally, may really just be making more difficult for them because it's not their fault that the timeline is stretched?
It's a fair question. In my correspondence with the attorney for the owner of the land and the building, they are in conversations and negotiations with CVS for a 5-year extension. So clearly there's an interest. And I was on a Zoom call with the corporate folks from CVS, and they have committed that they are going to, at some point, come back to our island. And so it seems like they're in negotiations, and I don't know if those negotiations are stalled. It's difficult to get any kind of a definitive answer or timeline. And again, all I'm asking for is some kind of a timeline and some sort of sense of urgency from both parties to let us to sort of send a message to the island, who have been great customers of CVS and will continue to be, that they've got a sense of urgency about proceeding forward. And I just don't think we've received that yet. I think you could make a separate argument, and maybe it's a whole different dynamic. I haven't explored it yet, but with respect to the gas stations on the island, I think pharmacy is even a little more sensitive because we've got seniors who have, again, a relationship with that pharmacist, and it's a real hardship to be traveling all over Southwest Florida to try to find your medications and find a pharmacist you're comfortable with. When there's one, by the way, our pharmacist, Allie, is over at Pelican Landing temporarily. Would love to come back. I'm not trying to bring her involved in this because she's wonderful. I don't want to get her in any trouble. But at the same time, it just seems like the public pressure has an amazing, especially if it's done in a respectful and positive way, has an amazing impact on corporate America in terms of trying to get their attention and get them to prioritize this. At the last meeting, I was able to ask one of the general counsel for the emergency management folks to see if the governor would be willing to call the CEO of CVS. And again, if there are challenges, Councilor Veach, and they have those challenges, boy, it'd be great if they would share those with us, even in a general sense, because they've had that opportunity, and both sides have chosen not to do that. It just seems odd to me that as you drive by there, there's just absolutely no activity and no communication as to when that activity would proceed.
Well, I'll say that based on what I just heard you say, there's a few things that I'd like to draw a little attention to. You said you've already reached out to them.
Yes.
And they have not responded yet?
Well, they've responded, yeah.
Oh, okay. Between that and knowing your history, just look up the street at the post office. You can very well get things done. Maybe not as fast as all of us would like, but you're getting them done. So, and you mentioned that they're in a legal discussion between extending their contract. I would be hesitant to do it at this time. I wouldn't want to give an advantage, a negotiating advantage to one side or the other by doing that. I'm 100% with you on everything you say about getting them back here and getting them back as soon and showing that support. If that means writing a letter from the council, from the town of Fort Myers Beach, from residents, I just don't know that I'd feel comfortable quite yet doing what you're suggesting.
And that's fine. I think sometimes just even having this conversation in a public forum can be helpful in terms of motivating and encouraging. So I thought it was important to mention because I've said enough. But thank you for the consideration on that matter. I think that's all I have.
I'd just like to chip in and going off what the mayor said, and I think a letter first from the council might hold a little more weight, and maybe it's something as these are the options we're looking at to address this situation, and let them know that could be something coming down or coming up. And I just appreciate you taking this on as well.
Keith, is that something that you can get put together for us? And I'm fully 100% behind that. I won't want to speak for my other counselors here, but it sounds like there's a will to want to do what we can do to politely suggest that we'd like to see them back on the island.
And I think, I don't know if you're willing to, sweeten the pot by saying we'll help maybe expedite their permits or do something like that?
Well, without any authority at all, I've already done that, Councilor Veach. But yes, when there's a public benefit like the post office, I helped them get in touch with FP&L. I offered them help with permitting. Of course, the federal government on the post office front, they're exempt from all state and local regulations, so they did not have to require any permits, which is a nice luxury to have if you're a federal entity. But yes, I think for entities that are serving the whole entire public at large on Fort Myers Beach, I think certainly trying to expedite some of those challenges is appropriate.
Anything else?
I'm sorry it went on for so long, but that's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Councilor Veach?
Something that's brought up again, and I've brought up in the past. I'd like to get something going with Times Square. I'd really like to see the property owners and the businesses get together with FEMA and DEP to see what can be done, what the ramifications of the moves are. I know some people came here and suggested that we set a liaison for a committee. I think that's a good idea. I'd like to just, because when they were talking about 5 to 10 years, when I looked at all the redevelopment going on, I think that Times Square is probably at the end of that process because it's complex. And there's a lot of things going on with that, a lot of resiliency things, a lot of potential funding for that, but that would take time. So I'd really like to see that ball get moving a little faster with Times Square. That's one thing. The other thing is there's been a lot of talks about density, and maybe we can put this on an M&P and talk about it, that, I've heard people wanting more density, everything from people who have a single-family home that want to rebuild a duplex, to developers that want twice the density, to this proposal that was put forth to the LPA at the end of that 7.5-hour meeting, where it seems to be that extra density is being thrown around a lot without any kind of bracketing around it, and the conversation that we still only have one 2-lane road is still to me the driver point to that. So I would like to have a frank talk about density, maybe at an M&P, so we can get everyone's opinion about when additional density is warranted and what kind of level, if there's any kind of consensus for that.
I think it's a very important conversation.
I strongly support that.
Okay, another little thing that came up, that, my garage still standing has a metal roof. 2 doors down, there's a couple houses with the concrete tile roofs. And the difference after the hurricane is pretty phenomenal. Neither of them were exposed to water. Both of them were in the wind. And my neighbor's property between my house and that house with the tile roofs is littered with these concrete tiles. So I don't know if we want to maybe mandate or somehow encourage people to put metal roofs on their houses just from a resiliency standpoint when we build back. And I don't know how you encourage without mandating that, but if that's something that there's consensus for having a conversation about for future M&P.
I think it'd be something that you would maybe want to send to the LPA and let them kind of work on that first, and then bring recommendations. But I understand your point. And someone that was in a house that had ceramic tiles on it during the storm, the eerie sound of those crashing on the pavement right outside your window is something that I'll probably never forget. So,
and they are concrete.
They're loud. They're missiles, that's for sure.
Yeah. Ken, I have just a couple more things here. The other thing that building back, I know this is actually in the comp plan, is that, and we're talking about corner lot zoning, is that when a property is on a beach access, the comp plan has us encouraging the egress to go off of Estero to the beach access. Now, we've already gone through and done a lot of cutouts on Estero. So, again, just a conversation, and I'm not really set one way or the other on this, about is the council interested in trying to encourage people to take their accesses off of Estero and onto the beach accesses. The plus side of it is traffic, less interference with traffic on Estero. The downside is you could lose some parking spots if people start going onto those beach accesses. So it's an interesting conversation, I think, that I'd just be interested to hear what the rest of the council thinks about.
I think that's a great conversation to have from a traffic standpoint. I think it could have an impact, and it may depend on almost on a case-by-case situation, but I think a great conversation to have.
Okay, so there's consensus maybe to have that in M&P. And one last thing that was, I went to a conference, and as part of the conference, some of the people from the FGC Water School, they did a LIDAR survey of the beach. They did one before and after the hurricane. And the LIDAR is like a radar, but it uses light, which has a much smaller wavelength, so you get much more detail out of it. And they mapped the beach and the scouring. And it was really interesting that the scouring happens along any kind of obstruction like a seawall. And also, even a path through vegetation, the scour tends to be in that path. And I've seen that in my house and some other houses. So just as a little bit of kind of information, I found it fascinating that, what we do with dune vegetation, what we do with seawalls, what we do with our structures, do have an effect with scour after a hurricane. And the scour happens when the water retreats, not when it's coming on. And that's it.
All right. Thank you. Councilor Woodson.
I just want to go back to, we had in the last M&P meeting a discussion about the licensing and fees for short-term rentals and the licensing for the PAL and PWVL. And if I recall, Attorney Herron said that whatever is in place right now would continue to be in place. But I don't know that where we ended up with that, nor do I know what kind of announcement was made to
The ordinance has
people
been
that were questioning this, about renewals of short-term
Adopted.
rentals and that type of thing.
Ordinance on resolution approving the fee schedule.
Because I'm still getting questions on it, so that's why I don't think we were very clear, or the communication wasn't very clear.
And for clarification on your point from me, so like in particular, the jet ski rentals, they need to show they have a business to get an SBA loan, and they need to have the license to be able to show they have a business.
And for
So
their insurance.
Right. And so there's some real, even though they may not be ready to open now, they need to get that clarified as soon as possible.
Exactly.
The conversation that took place was that at the next meeting, the second reading of the ordinance that would allow the city to adopt or modify all the fee schedules by resolution will be on. It has already been advertised. It will be on. And then as soon as that ordinance is adopted, then you all can take up any discussion you all want regarding the actual fee schedule.
What we're talking about here is not necessarily the fee schedule, it's in the people who need to have a license renewed in order to continue with their recovery.
In that regard, the conversation was that we would apply it. Nothing's changed. We're not, as staff, necessarily denying. I think that the issue is submitting all the required materials, and I don't know, to be honest with you, a particular business, whatever it might be that they're engaging in, that is having an issue with regard to that. Honestly, but I think my comment was that we're not doing anything different.
But I think it has to do with the date, and correct me if I'm wrong, are the licenses on a calendar year?
Not on a calendar year. And in fact, if I remember correctly, the short-term rental is on, they're cattywonk. They're not, they become due and payable at different times of year, depending upon what type of license it is that you need. And I, unfortunately, off the top of my head, I do not know one that is due for short-term rentals and for PVLs. I don't know either date off the top of my head, but
Short-term rentals
I'm
was December
99%
31st.
sure it is not calendar-based.
I thought they were like October. But can we just make sure with staff, John, that if someone, like for the jet ski people and the ones that need this license, that they can get their license renewed and then get their fees at least prorated until they can functionally get back to work?
That's all.
You got it. Councilor King?
Something we heard today from the Johnsons, and also a contact I had received over the last week, was restarting the committees. And where are the members on that? I think, John, you had talked about that before. They needed to submit again, or I guess about reappointing members. I know Amy sent out a email about that as well from someone.
We did receive reappointment requests and new appointment requests. They were scheduled to go to the first October meeting. Then Ian changed everyone's look at everything. So with council's direction, we can bring them back whenever you're ready.
Can we bring it back to the first meeting in February? Just to go out, that was one of my things as well, so not to jump in on I spoke with Neil the GM here, about using the space for the committees to be able to meet, and he was amenable to that. So I think if we could get that ball rolling, it's going to be important for public safety, for all the committees, Murph, to get them reorganized again. They're ready to go to work. I say let them work.
I would concur.
Something else that was brought up to my attention over the weekend, back to Bayside Park. Where are we with that? Getting that back online?
I'll take that one. I have not heard. We're still waiting on our state partners to give us an answer. It is in the hands of the person that makes that decision. We're just waiting for their decision to come back, but it has not been forgotten. It's $500,000, so I suppose it takes a little time to make that decision. That's quite the investment, and we appreciate them at least acknowledging that they see it as an important asset for the town, something that could be very quickly back up and running. We have a meeting with Director Guthrie, I believe, on Wednesday again. Hopefully we can get some more clarification on that.
Thank you. Also, and this, I don't know if you want to address it then or not, or if something we can do in the interim. I remember when Director Guthrie was here and he talked about how the water canals were a very slow process to try and get that taken care of. I know I received a couple contacts again over the weekend that there has been at least in some of the areas, a first pass, but they were anxious to get the canals again cleaned up, especially on the south end, so they could do what Floridians do and put their boats in the water.
I'll give you a little, I didn't know this, and I learned it from hearing Director Guthrie's testimony last week up in Tallahassee, that once the state gets, one of the things he's pushing for is to change this, but once the state gets notification of a titled vessel, they have to wait 45 days before they can touch it.
I'm not talking vessel, this is just debris.
Now, you see those barges in the back bay going up and down all day. They're working. In my conversations with the debris removal people, the problem they're having is access. There's only limited places on the island that they can pull the barges up to. Right now, they're using this mosquito control board's property to be able to load the vessels up there. So if anybody has any property that's sitting empty and they want to let the state come in and haul debris out, because if they're hauling it all the way up north, so when they have to go all the way to the south end, it takes a long time to get up there to dump it off and come all the way back. I know there had been some discussions, and this is another item that I was going to bring up, but since you're on it, if you don't mind, I'll just throw it out there. Do you know, I guess, have we spoken to them at all about the town-owned properties? I think the one on Virginia that we had talked about a while back, that was at Virginia, towards the end, that the town owns as a right-of-way thing that's kind of in the middle of the island. There was a discussion back in the day about someone wanting to swap properties with it or something. I don't know if that could be a solution to get something mid-island to help get some of the debris loaded up and out of there.
I don't know the status of that, but that would be helpful. And they are making multiple passes, just like the roadside debris. You know, they're clearing canals now of debris with multiple passes, using the mosquito control facility. If something was more conveniently located or logistically more direct, that would be helpful.
I think it's a really good idea, Mayor, but I'm concerned that it's not a very big lot compared to the mosquito abatement.
Well, yeah,
it's close.
Yeah, it's, and I didn't know this until last weekend when I was speaking with them, that they don't get to take that debris to Bay Oaks or to Lover's Key. That has to go directly out to Waste Management. So those trucks have to go a long way, and that's even the stuff that comes out of, I didn't know this either, but even the stuff that comes out of Lover's Key can't go across the street into that pile. It has to go out to Waste Management. And that's just the way the contracts are set up. So they're hauling this debris a long way.
All the stuff from Bay Oaks doesn't go to Lover's Key. It goes. So our pile doesn't go into their pile. It goes on to the Waste Management?
Yeah, when I'm talking about those, when they pick it up, so they pick up the waterway debris, it has to go to a specific plant for processing because it has to be done differently. And that's neither of those two locations. So that has to go, same as Lover's Key, it has to go a long way out before they can turn around and come back. So it definitely slows the process down, and I don't want to speak for Director Guthrie, but I'm guessing that's part of the reason why he says it takes a long time to be able to get the canals cleaned out. But back to you, John, sorry.
That's no fun. And lastly, Vice Mayor, you've done a great job with these key questions with key staffers, and again, having Steve on over the weekend. It seemed like it's almost a cumbersome process to locate the sand dollar on the Facebook or the home page, the web page, and then try to find the permits there. It didn't seem that cumbersome to me, but maybe just something as simple as putting a hot link on the front page of the town's website for permits and just click that instead of having to.
We are looking at ways to make that more direct and simple, and I'm one that's challenged with finding anything on the internet, so I understand that, and we are looking at ways to simplify it, and we'll throw that one into the mix. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Most of mine have been covered, and out of the sake of time, I'll just have one that keeps coming up in emails. I don't know if my colleagues are getting the same emails, but it concerns water bills, which I'm sure Mr. Wilkins is tired of hearing about. But there seems to be an issue, and with John's guidance, there seems to be some issue with a reoccurring fee, even if there's no services, versus shutting it off, so that you don't get those services. And I'll let the town manager kind of give you what he told me, but for those that don't know, there's people that are still getting bills even though their house isn't there, and that could be, I was one, I got an outrageous bill, and like everyone else, I was a little upset and tried to figure it out. Come to find out, it was a pipe in our backyard that was busted somewhere that we didn't even know there was a pipe, and it was just oozing out 3/4 inch pipe of water for a month. So you can imagine that water bill. So other people are having the same issues, and the town staff is actually doing a really good job of trying to address it when they hear about it. But if you'll just kind of give us a quick little update as to what you replied back in that email.
Sure. There's a lot of different variables there, and the town attorney and I have not finished. We're in the middle of discussions on that and hadn't completed anything yet. But this is actually also my direct experience with this, having had a house lost in a hurricane and bought another vacant lot from a house that was destroyed in the same hurricane, and holding on to that lot for 6 years before it was developed. We didn't pay a water fee or even a connection fee until we connected. As long as the lot was vacant with no plans for redevelopment, there was no service charge or continuing fee for that. But when you file to build and connect, then you start paying your fee again. So I would think it's with us here on the island, it's a matter of resuming service or not. And if you're disconnected, you're disconnected. And this is our risk, because we're going to lose revenue from this. But if you're disconnected, you're not paying a continuing fee. When you start redeveloping your property, then you would reconnect. You'd pay the reconnection fee, and you would then resume your monthly minimum payments. That's my experience.
And if I could just ask, just by way of information, so just so folks realize this, when you look at your water bill, you do pay a base fee just for infrastructure, and that's apart from your water usage piece. But there's also a stormwater fee. So even though you may not have any water services and are paying no base rate for your water fee, you still may be paying a stormwater fee.
That's correct.
And that's on your water bill.
They are separate fees, though. Actually, they're separate utilities, and the stormwater fee is based on impervious surface.
Right.
So it's we still have a lot of impervious surface out, a lot of foundations. So that's still being generated that goes into the public system. As far as water goes, I agree
but Keith, people see that stormwater fee on their water bill, correct?
I've not seen the bill. I'm not paying mine yet.
So I guess my point is some people get confused when they're still getting a water bill when they have no water turned on, nothing. But some of that may be for their stormwater fee.
That's correct.
What I'm suggesting.
Yes.
Yep.
And the town attorney made a good point that we have to have some level of operating revenue to maintain our system, to repair our system, and expand our system, and the minimum fee certainly helps support that. So there's two sides to that coin.
But to your point, if you'd still have the stormwater fee,
correct,
even if you discontinued your service, but you would no longer have that monthly water fee.
That's correct.
That's the clarification I think I wanted to get.
Oh, sorry.
All right, that's all I have. If there's nothing else for the good of the order,
Move to adjourn.
One thing that I, for the motion, John, I know we're all caught to get out of here, is and I don't see any of the planning and building guys here, but the non-conforming lots, these little cottages that are up north, one of my conversations was that the non-conformity was not primarily the setbacks, that there were issues that there was like a state regulation about how many houses you could serve off of an easement. And I would like to get that kind of clarified. I know that this is working their way through the LPA, but I want to make sure we're not going to fix something that's not really the primary problem.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think Jason Green is aware of that. And you're right, there's so much density you can have within an acre. So he's aware of it, and I think he's working with the LPA to make recommendations to see what we can do.
All right.
All right, now go, John.
In a desire to get out and celebrate National King Day, I move for adjournment.
We have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second. A motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn is good. Granted.